Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Larkspur City Council meeting. Let us start with a roll call. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Andre.
Here.
Councilmember Paulson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Way.
Here.
Mayor Kandel.
I am here. Let's slide into the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you are able. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Public comment is for any items that are not on the regularly scheduled agenda. So at this time, I will ask if there's anybody out there who would like to make a public comment on an item not on the agenda. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is JJ Andre, and I live on Sycamore Avenue. I'd like to thank the city council and staff for their dedication. And since it's budget season, I'd like to provide 3 nudges on revenue opportunities for the city. Wouldn't the budget process be a little bit easier if revenues were up 10%? Larkspur has opportunities to increase its revenue, such as first, we should talk about Serenity. Larkspur is foregoing $1 million of annual property tax revenue from this luxury apartment complex. 4% of Larkspur's annual budget every year. When you add in the foregone county and school tax revenue, the subsidy is $3 million a year. To date, public budgets have missed out on $10 million property tax revenue that should have been collected. Catalyst, who's behind Serenity, has been paid approximately $10 million when you look at their fees they've received in cash and the bonds they received through the financing. So you might want to think, well, what are the benefits that Larkspur is getting in return for this $1 million annual tax subsidy? You know, there's renters. What's the benefits to them? As the city council looked at that, I'd suggest they're probably de minimis, but I'd suggest the city council should look at it. One housing expert, Matt Schwartz, who's president of California Housing Partnership, he's a leading Affordable Housing Act advocate, been involved in this throughout the state of California for over 30 years. Talks about Serenity is like getting a slight discount on a Ferrari, calling it affordable. That's in a Forbes article called California Scheming, all about Larkspur and Serenity. So if you haven't read the Forbes article, California Scheming, I invite you to check it out. Larkspur should be carefully monitoring the finances of Serenity to sustain on benevolent efforts to increase our workforce in senior housing. More of us should be closely monitoring Serenity, speaking out against this scheme, which will fail any impartial cost-benefit analysis. There are public officials who are looking into this, including many county assessor recorders, including Marin County Shelley Scott, trying to course correct and deliver the tax bills that should have been going every year. So the first nudge is for Larkspur to analyze the high cost to the taxpayers and the dubious benefits to the renters and decide what the next steps should be. Secondly, in terms of revenue opportunities, you're looking at the housing element, and some of the outdated code provisions need to be changed. Other red tape that might be in either municipal processes or codes. Unfortunately, there's so many real estate sites in Larkspur that should be better utilized. We're all kind of familiar with them, but Lucky's, the former Corbett's hardware store, the empty restaurant at 340 Bon Air, the empty Bed Bath & Beyond, and other property near the ferry terminal. So my second nudge is, let's think creatively. Maybe you run a pilot program. For example, on Doherty Drive, why don't we have food trucks? Maybe near Piper Park or near Lucky's, like use fees and sales tax. Every school day, there's hundreds of Redwood High School students walking up and down to get lunch in the area around Lucky's. On weekends, there's hundreds of visitors who attend sporting events each day at Piper. We have food trucks at Marin Country Mart. I don't remember ever seeing them on this side of town. Let's also be receptive to positive developments such as housing, grocery stores, food trucks, and restaurants. Just in general, as you're looking at the housing element, it's not just housing, it's also the businesses. We need to reduce the friction to opening businesses and housing that will benefit Larkspur. This friction results in lower property and sales tax revenue. So my third nudge is for Larkspur to streamline the outdated city codes and processes that discourage businesses. We should encourage appropriate businesses that can thrive in Larkspur. Look into these 3 steps, you could increase the revenues by 10% or greater, making Larkspur a better place to live, and it'll make your budget process a little bit easier. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there other public comments? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Ted Horton. We live at 14 Willow Avenue up by the King Mountain Trailhead and have been in Larkspur since 1995. My interest started when I was watching Dennis's comments the other week on the city council meeting on the live stream. And my curiosity was piqued. I went through the 594-page bond offering. I went through the San Jose memos on this financial structure. I went through the housing consultant report that's available on the Emma website and anything else I could Google on this topic. I distilled this whole journey into 4 slides, which I've passed out to you, and 2 questions and 1 homework assignment. The first slide you'll see is the requirement for annual audited financial statements. We've had 4 years of history on this deal. We're in the show me part of this. We should be seeing how it's performing. Slide 2, second page, are the noticing requirements in the bond documents. What notices has the city of Larkspur received? Is there any distress on this $230 million deal? Slide 3 was kind of my putting together an org chart on it. My markup are the little balloons in yellow. It was a highly levered deal. The bond debt totaled, it was around $250 million for a $225 million purchase price. It was substantially greater. The debt service coverage ratio was 1-to-1. That's like buying a $2 million house and having a $2 million mortgage on it. I'd have a very hard time sleeping at night if that was the case. The pro forma operating expenses were lower than the historical operations, even when you just take out the property taxes, the foregone property taxes. Now the net of all this is if the rents are lower and operating expenses are higher over the 30-year term of the bond, public benefits would be negatively affected. How affected? You go to the last slide, and this was in an HRNA paper that they did for San Jose. It was a very interesting slide where they said, well, these are the cumulative costs and these are the cumulative benefits. And they did it over the term of the project. We've got 4 years in this one. You ought to be able to go through and say, okay, this is where we are. This is how we're tracking on this investment so far. Because for a city with a $25 million budget to have basically issued $250 million in bonds, there's something that struck me a little odd about that. 2 questions. Okay, 4 years of operations to understand cumulative net results. How do they compare with the bond documents, pro forma cash flows? Second question is if NOI is insufficient to repay the bonds, or if there are tax liens that are put on based on what JJ was saying, what are the viable exit strategies for the city of Larkspur as a host of this asset? And the homework assignment is, let's get those 4 years of property operating statements. I mean, Catalyst office is two blocks down the street, and figure out what the cumulative net results are, what the benefit is and what the cost has been to date. And then you can start talking about trending that out. So my comments, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask, are there other comments about Serenity? People want to talk about Serenity today? Okay, because we're going to be addressing that a little bit later in the meeting. So I just want to make sure we're, for public comment, I'm trying to keep people to 3 minutes. We're going to bring this back at a time when people will be able to speak for more than 3 minutes. So we can have a little bit of a bigger discussion on it. I'm just not sure tonight's the time because we do have a busy agenda, and we are limited to 3 minutes for the open comment. Okay, so see no other hands for that. Are there other comments on other issues that people would like to talk about this morning, this evening? No, okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. Stephanie, do you want to talk about Serenity now, just because it was brought up, as opposed to later, if that would be okay with staff?
It's not on the agenda, so the issue, it depends sort of where you want to take the discussion since.
Well, I think we had been talking about whether we wanted to put this on a future agenda, and we can do that under council member reports if
Or you
if
could
you
do it now,
prefer.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
So
so
I think if you're interested in a future agenda item, that would be an appropriate response to the public comment. This is a pretty expansive subject with a lot of details and multiple stakeholders. So the first agenda item you may want, in my opinion, would be probably to consider an agenda item at your next meeting to form an ad hoc committee to serve as an exploratory committee to work with staff. I think there's, since we started getting public comments, staff has started collecting research, and it looks to me like we probably have several months of work to do a truly comprehensive summary for the community.
all right, so and so I understand this, so the public understands, when you talk about a subcommittee, that would be to assist staff in preparing a presentation for a presentation in front of the full committee, in front of the public. Is that how that would work?
Right, there. My opinion after sort of delving through this, there's so many stakeholders. And I think it'd be appropriate for members of the city council to participate in engagement with the stakeholders. And so that would be the purpose of the ad hoc committee, is to be part of the first meetings and discussions with those stakeholders prior to public presentations, because I think the ability to do an interview, which is not really what you can do here in a city council meeting, would probably benefit the council later on. And the constraints of the Brown Act suggest you would want to form a committee to do that.
Okay. Having heard that, well, okay, before Stephanie, do something before we,
I think we have a very, I think that's a good idea because I think we have some skills that can look at that from our council members here. We've done that effectively, for instance, in rent control, when both of us were on a committee, a subcommittee to deal with a property owner regarding rental assistance programs and getting more information. And it was a lot easier to get direct information from that stakeholder by having a subcommittee. So I think that'd be a good thing. So that your meaning then is that goes on the next agenda to form that.
To
So
form
it
the
has not been
committee,
agendized.
and then we can get started on the engagement process. And, the committee can help guide staff toward issues you want explored in detail.
okay. Let me ask Councilmember Andre, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I think I really don't need to address, I think the public comments were pretty thorough, and I want to thank people for being proactive and looking at the situation and bringing it to council. I do agree that we should probably form an ad hoc committee. That's probably sounds like it might be the best way to handle this. I was just going to propose that we have an agenda item where staff reports back to council and provides a thorough report on the cost benefits analysis on what the historical trends have been and what the current financial health of Serenity is. So those were some of the items that I wanted to address in this report.
That's what that can get.
Okay. I'm with you. Councilmember Paulson, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's good this is brought up, and, I'm sure there's a lot of complexity. I'm curious, how the previous council voted on this, because this was a decision that was deliberated in 2018 or 19 or whenever. So I think getting more facts and doing some due diligence would be helpful. I endorse that.
Okay, so with that, we are going to ask staff to put on the agenda at the next city council meeting an item so we could form an ad hoc committee so that we could further look into this issue and present to the public and to the remaining council members the facts that we're able to uncover.
Will do.
Okay. All right, that moves us on to item number 3, presentations and proclamations. 3.1. Marin County Office of Emergency Management presentation from Director Stephen Torrance.
Good evening, council. It's a pleasure to be with you and also distinguished leadership from the city of Larkspur. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Stephen Torrance. I serve as the county's director of emergency management for Marin County. Our office has gone through some transitions. So with consultation from city leadership, we are here to provide a general overview of the transition of our office, but also more so how we interact with the city of Larkspur to forward emergency preparedness, emergency response and recovery. So a very short presentation about our mission. I'll break that down into a couple of different spaces, but also have an opportunity to answer any questions from yourselves as well. So first and foremost, I'm fairly new to Marin County. I've been with the county for about a year. And not only is my position new to the county of Marin, but our office has gone through some significant transition, historically being housed under the sheriff's department and historically and now being shifted to the fire department. So with that, you may have heard of our office previously known as the Office of Emergency Services. The Office of Emergency Management is more in line with what we do as the Emergency Operations Center, where we manage a lot of incidents. And so with that, that's where you'll see the terminology change. In addition to that, our office is actually very unique, not only within Marin County, but within the state of California, where we serve two functions. First and foremost, we are housed within the county fire department, but we are also known as what is statewide known as a operational area coordinator, which legally defines us as an entity that is instructed to help every jurisdiction within the county of Marin. So that is cities, towns, and special districts. And so we treat each agency that we work with as a direct partner. And I'm going to focus in today on that partnership with the city of Larkspur. So a lot of people are not familiar with the Office of Emergency Management, as we do have a behind the scenes type role. And typically when you do see either you hear from our agency or you see our staff out in the field, it's not always the best day, but we like to make sure that we have a really thoughtful perspective on our blue sky days as well. And so with that, I'm not going to go into every single thing in detail, but a lot of the things that our office oversees is alert and warning for the entire county. So you'll hear me talk about Alert Marin. That is something that is run by our office in addition to some of the Nixle note to text messages that go out throughout the community. We work with our fire department, so specifically with Central Marin Fire on evacuations and how we do evacuations with the local police department with Central Marin, the sheriff's department, and then also making sure those notifications get out to the community as quick as possible. With that, if we do have those days, our office actually is one of the lead agencies that brings together the disaster support services. So if shelters are needed, family assistance are needed, we start that process and we provide those functions to every jurisdiction throughout the county. And then also the main thing that we do during an emergency is we run the county's the Emergency Operations Center, which is in consultation with every single jurisdiction here, as we want to make sure that we are supporting every single jurisdiction as much as we can. And if there's needs, we can work collaboratively with all of our agencies to provide those resources. Some of the other things that we get into are disaster planning, as we'll talk about in a little bit, and then also Homeland Security and preparedness grants. So as we start working with our agencies, we want to make sure that if we can tap into federal and state dollars to better serve our community, that we can also work with the cities and towns to implement those projects countywide. And so with that, our office used to be about 4 people. We have significantly in very similar to disasters. They are starting to impact communities a little bit harder. And so with that, the county and our jurisdictions have agreed to include additional staff members. And so with that, we've increased not only my position, but additional coordinators to be able to support the cities, towns, and special districts within the county. In addition to that, bringing on specific staff that help with mitigation and recovery grants, and then also preparedness grants. And so we can make sure that we can provide those to our cities and towns. So the first mission that we've is most notable to members of the community, whether it be throughout the West Marin, specifically the Larkspur. We hope and strive that these are brand names that people are able to recognize. The Ready Marin program is housed within the Office of Emergency Management, and so is the Alert Marin program. And so those are programs that you don't see as something that is, it's not the Office of Emergency Management. And the reason that is the case is because this is a system that is owned by every single jurisdiction in the county. So I like to say that Alert Marin and Ready Marin are also products of Larkspur. And so with that, we want to make sure that those programs are being pushed out, whether it be through an equity-driven position where we're working with specific communities on trying to say, if you're homebound, how can we get you better prepared? If you are a person with new kids, how can we get you better prepared? And so we want to make sure that each one of those programs is tailored to the members of our community. In addition to that, we have a lot of evacuation drills that we work with the fire departments on, and then also general community engagement in that space as well. When we start talking about readiness, we don't want to be caught off guard when it comes to disasters. And so our day-to-day is also in the readiness space. We want to make sure that as we start working with our partner agencies, that we are consistently doing training and exercise, not only with the county staff, but also with Central Marin Fire, with Central Marin Police Authority, to make sure that if we have to collectively respond to an emergency, we know how to actually work with each other ahead of schedule. And so we are collectively working together where we have a monthly operational area training where we bring all of our partners together and we have a space for training. It's about a 2-hour meeting, but we have 60 or so people that come to that meeting every single month where we have a specific topic so we can better prepare every single agency within the county to be able to collectively respond to an emergency, because emergencies do not know jurisdictional boundaries, and we want to make sure that we're preparing ourselves collectively. We also do full-scale exercises with all of our partner agencies. Sometimes it includes ferries, sometimes it includes Golden Gate Bridge, but we want to make sure that no matter what type of hazard that we are responding to, whether it's human caused or natural, that we are prepared to be able to respond with all of the partner agencies here. And this is also one of the spaces where we have a dedicated coordinator that is assigned to work with the city of Larkspur. And that is a product of us being able to upstaff our team to be able to make sure that the town has a dedicated person to work with and advance emergency preparedness within the organization. And then in the next space, this is actually one of the largest projects that is coming to a conclusion, and I'm very happy to see that this product is not only one of the first ones to pass the FEMA hurdle, but the county actually has a multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plan. And within that, it is a very dense document and we are aware of it. But what it does is it allows for us to understand the hazards that happen here in the county of Marin, whether they be technological, human caused, or natural. We want to know what those assessments are and how can we best mitigate them and or prevent them. So this document, working with the city of Larkspur, all 11 cities and towns within the county have partnered on this plan. The county has the base plan, which is over 1,000 pages, but it dives into every single natural hazard that we have. And then the city of Larkspur has a standalone annex that is currently being worked on with our partner agencies. That is from 2023. It's being reviewed by FEMA right now. But at the same time, it will come to the cities for adoption, along with the rest of the jurisdictions within the county. But the main thing that this does is it not only recognizes the hazards that are occurred throughout the county, but it proposes significant projects that can help mitigate and or prevent those hazards. By having these plans in place, it also opens the door for federal and state funding to help those projects be completed, as we want to make sure that we can reduce our hazards throughout the county as much as we can. So as we look into the response phase, this is generally where we are behind the scenes, but we are intending to help every single jurisdiction. So whether it be Central Marin Police and or Fire, we want to be able to provide them with the resources behind the scenes so they can meet their mission on the worst days possible. And so with that, you'll see that we have an all hazards response. So whether it's your wildfire, an earthquake, or cybersecurity, we want to make sure that the agencies that we're working with have the resources so they're not caught on pause trying to figure out how to respond. We want to be able to backfill them with the appropriate response equipment and or supplies. With that, we have an emergency operations center that is newly built and remodeled. And so the city also has the ability to come to the county's emergency operations center and partner up with us. That way we can collectively respond to an incident, and we don't have to worry about sending emails to each other, because what we can do is walk right over to someone and say, here's my issue, here's how we can fix it. And that's the partnership of that operational area structure. We also have the means to be able to provide emergency supports functions. So whether it be food, water, shelter, those are things that we are working with every single jurisdiction on. So we have a baseline way of responding. And then also logistics. How do we get resources into the community? What is the most efficient way of doing that? We want to make sure that we have one way of doing that. So whether it's setting up one center for people to go and get resources, we have an efficient way of putting that plan together. In addition to that, we want to make sure that we know what's going on throughout the entire community. And specifically when we have these major incidents, we actually have a new coordinator that's specifically tasked with ensuring that we can rebuild our community after any type of emergency. And so within that space, you'll see that we have the ability to work with the cities and towns on assessments. So if there is damage, whether it be to private or public infrastructure, we want to be able to get that information to the federal government or to the state government so we can bring in those disaster assistance dollars as quick as possible. What that turns into is local assistance centers being set up where we can truly provide people the simple things like, I lost my ID card because of the incident. We want to be able to provide state resources to be able to connect that person with that ID card. Seems like a very, trivial thing at the moment, but if that's the one thing that's stopping you from, going and using your credit card because someone needs to verify your ID, those are the things that we want to make sure we provide that assistance with those local assistance centers. Rebuilding private homes through individual assistance, public assistance, with us being able to rebuild with grant dollars, local infrastructure, whether it be fire stations, city halls, streets, roads, schools. All of these funds are started with the collaboration so we can work with each agency through that process, but also making sure that we can rebuild our businesses at the same time. So we can go to the grocery store, so we can go put gas or energize our car, whatever those resources that are available, those are tied to the economic resilience of the community and a part of the recovery. So coming into close, in coordination with the city of Larkspur, there are multiple things that we are working on, not only having the alert Marin system, but also looking at making sure that we have all of these evacuation points that are being identified within the community. What are our pinch points? How do we actually go through and do alert and warning specifically here? Working with the city to make sure that we have an emergency plan that connects to the county's plan. We want to make sure that those processes are in line with each other. In the event that we need to be able to push down federal grants, we have that process in place because the plans talked with each other. In addition to that, we have a 24-hour duty officer. So in the event that an incident happens here in the city of Larkspur, we have an Office of Emergency Management staff that can be contacted, whether it be a significant fire or significant police event. Those agencies or public works event have a means to be able to contact us to be able to send out those alerts in the event that something happens where we need to wake people up in the middle of the night. We have a person that will be here to be able to support the city of Larkspur to make sure that we're protecting members of the community. So to just kind of close out, this is kind of my fuzzy warm slide. When it comes down to what we are here to do, we have a large mission. But at the end of the day, When it's the worst day for the members of the public, for the city, the towns around us, the police department, or police authority and the fire district, we are here to support every single agency on their worst day. We are behind the scenes, but we are here to support every single person to make sure that not only they can respond, but recover from whatever incident is happening. And our readiness is Larkspur's readiness. We are one county, that's how we look at it through our operational area lens. And so being able to make sure that those services, whether it be the preparedness side through a Ready Marin or the response side where we are doing collective recovery efforts, all of these things allow for each city within the county of Marin to be lifted up to make sure that we can appropriately respond to all of these emergencies. Even if it's local, we're here to help. That's where we're at right now. And so with that, I thank you very much for the time to be able to join you. And I've also, if there's any questions, happy to take those as well.
All right, well, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. Appreciate you taking the time to do that. Thank you. I'll then bring it back to council. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, first, Stephen, I wanted to thank you for being here. I just a shout out. Doing the monthly neighborhood response groups, and you've come to those meetings, and I've seen you at MWPA, and I really appreciate what you're doing, and I want to thank you for that. I had several questions. I'll try to be really brief. The first one is maybe you can just walk us through, a use case. So let's say we have a fire in Madrone or a flood on Larkspur Madera Creek or an earthquake, and normally for 2 to 3 days, there's the systems are overwhelmed. And I see what you're doing as essentially centralizing dispatch and logistics. So right now we tell the NRGs that you're kind of on your own for 2 to 3 days. So, that's why we have block captains, neighborhood response groups. How would you be a response multiplier? I understand that you can send out alerts and all that, but everyone knows a fire just happened. So what are you guys actually doing in that scenario?
So in that space, there's a lot of things that we are doing. So first, what we're doing is actually activating the Emergency Operations Center to be able to bring in resources, not only from Marin, but throughout the entire state. So we actually have a number of mutual aid channels that are outside of law and fire that can help support not only localized communities, but localized fire departments to be able to do those various missions that are not putting water on the fire. So those are some of the first things that we do. Part of that external alerting to the public is we're doing a lot of internal alerting to keep everyone up to speed. As you'll see with some of the hurricanes that hit back east, there is a lot of response structures that can be started prior to that incident happening. A lot of those structures are in place and we have those. Of course, we being on the West Coast, we have a lot of the no notice events. So there is a little bit of lag time, but when it comes down to that 2 to 3 days, we do not want that to be the case. We want it to be that, we can provide those essential services within a matter of hours. Yes, there will be some lag. And so that's where our preparedness mission is still at the front of what we do, is because we want to make sure that in the event that there is a 2-day window, that our messaging tells people, please be ready for 2 days just in case. But there's a lot of things moving behind the scenes. So if we're talking with our utilities, our counties, so we have a strong partnership with Sonoma County. If it's a localized incident, I know I can pick up my personal cell phone and call my colleague from Sonoma County on his personal cell phone and say, I need 20 people. I know he's going to send that because we have those mutual aid agreements in place. And we have those throughout the state, and that extends to our private sector as well. We want to make sure that we have our supply chain that's sound. So in the event that we're talking about pipes and grounds, or we're talking about being able to provide food, water, and shelter, that we have those mutual aid channels to be able to tap into and activate those with those pre-designed templates to say, we need, 25 generators that are coming from Southern California. Those protocols are in place to be able to tap into those systems.
Great. That's a thorough answer. I appreciate that. I'll be brief so my colleagues can ask some questions too. One other one was, the operations center, and a lot of what you're talking about is data sharing. And, one thing I've run into time and time again in the county, for example, block captains may know who on their block is old and, needs a special attention. And I'm assuming Central Marin Police knows that. But, to the extent to which we have so much data from MWPA on fire vulnerability and from the police and from FEMA and all that, is part of your mission to create a single source of truth, where the data resides and to be able to deploy that in these situations?
So the answer is yes. So we do actually have a system that's currently in place. It's called Web EOC. That is.
I'm sorry, what is it called?
Web EOC, and that's our incident management system where we share information between all of the jurisdictions. So in the event that we're doing day-to-day response, we can currently share information, whether it is trying to figure out who is sheltering in place versus if there's an incident, we're all utilizing the same system. And we can also tap into those systems that we might have. One agency might have a database that needs to be shared. We can request that and it can be shared via that system and everyone can tap into it. So we have that in place.
Is Web EOC two-way? So if I get a text from you, I can text back and you get some information?
It's an internal system for the governments and special agencies right now. But Everbridge does have a means where we can send out a notification and request information. That is not something that a lot of agencies use, but in the event that we need to be able to poll the community, we can do that.
Great. And last question, I really like the emphasis on equity. It was in your first slide. How do you measure that? And also, I'd like to add vulnerability because we're an aging community. So, there's a Latino population in San Rafael. There's different, vulnerable communities, but in equity, but how, what is the measure and how do you measure it? Like right now, how far behind are we on equity from 30,000 foot view?
I'll start on the 30,000 foot view. Across the board, emergency management is collectively behind the bar in making sure that we have equitable responses. People first saw it during Hurricane Katrina, where we saw that there was disproportionate populations that were affected by the hurricane, and it is still happening. However, here in Marin, we are doing our best to make strides to close that gap and understand that gap. So during the March 23rd Alert Marin test, we have data that shows how many people opted into the system. That's a great talking point to be able to share that we had 4,000 people opt into the system within the 30-day period. I've asked my team to go back and figure out who are the people that did not and why. And so what we are doing right now, we're going to be sharing this in the next couple of weeks, fingers crossed, is looking at the data because we know across the board there are 32% of the adult population of Marin is opted into Alert Marin. What we've done is gone through and overlaid that with census data and figured out where we have the lowest pockets and starting to look at the census demographics to understand what are the similarities between those areas. Is it low tech? Is it non-English speaking? Is it people that have that are aged over 65? By us looking at that data and looking at those data pockets, that's how we're going to change our Ready Marin posture, because we want to make sure that we have different ways of communicating with our underserved community.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I've been working in this space, as you know, since I was first elected in 2013. And then prior to that, kind of locally here in Larkspur. And I just have to say the evolution of this department and the quality of the material that's available to the public and to the electeds and to the cities is extraordinarily better than it's been in the past. And I think that's kudos to a lot of people who have been working within Marin County for a long period of time, from our fire chief, Jason Weber, to other committees that are actively involved in this. And I've seen the tremendous growth of information that's available to the public and support that's there. So I appreciate this and look forward to more and more of the ability to make this an effective county should we never have one of the major disasters. And I was just watching the news before I came here tonight, and what's happening in the Midwest with these tornadoes is extraordinary. And as our world is changing, as our earth warms and our storms get worse, I think we all need to realize that there are more chances that we will be experiencing, maybe not tornadoes, but other types of devastating emergency situations that will impact many aspects of our community. So I think the timing couldn't be better for this real progressive change in this organization. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Andre, is there anything you want to ask? Nope. Okay. And I am also good as well. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
I just wanted to make sure the council and the community know that Assistant City Manager Shannon O'Hare is our point person for emergency management here in the city. And if you ever have any questions that you want to channel through staff, you can reach out to Shannon.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is another presentation from Echo, supporting Larkspur tenants and landlords, from Christina Soto.
So as Christina comes up, I also wanted to note her colleague Jonathan Torres is available on Zoom. The council will recall that at your last meeting, you approved us to enter into a services agreement with Echo to be our partner in supporting the tenant protection ordinances, the rent stabilization ordinance, and the eviction protection ordinance. Echo, if you visit their website and look through their material, you'll see, and I think Christine will speak, help a lot of agencies that do various levels of this type of regulation or promotion of tenant landlord relations. And we're really excited to have them as a partner. And I'm gonna, before I turn it over to Christina, let you know that we met earlier today to put some final details together, and we will begin a dynamic launch of our web pages starting tomorrow. And people will have the ability to contact Echo. They'll have the ability to get their questions answered through the Echo staff. And then there'll also be the information for folks who need to engage the city staff through the ordinances. So with that, Christina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'm really excited to be here. As you said, my name is Christina Soto, and I am the Executive Director of Echo Housing. And I have been their Executive Director for 10 months. So kind of brand new and kind of exciting to see our agency grow a little bit. As Dan said, Jonathan Torres, who is our Housing Program Coordinator, is on via Zoom. And he is actually going to be the staff person that is going to actually be taking all of the calls for this project. So Echo Housing was founded in 1964 by a group of volunteers in the community. And in 1965, we became incorporated as a nonprofit. We actually service 3 counties and now Larkspur. So we have Alameda County, Contra Costa County, and Monterey County. And also we are a full service fair housing and tenant landlord counseling agency. And our staff is also HUD certified, which means that we are recognized through HUD as a housing counseling agency. What our scope of work is for us to provide education and awareness regarding your housing rights and responsibilities for both tenants and landlords. And I want to be really clear that we do not take sides. So any information that we would be giving to tenants, if they want us to speak to a landlord, we will also be giving them similar information. So we want both sides to be prepared and to know exactly what the ordinance says for them to be able to come out to any type of resolution that may be needed. The other thing that Echo does is we do not tell tenants or landlords what to do. We give them options. We tell them, you know, in your case, you can do A, B, or C. If you're not sure, we can call you back and we can talk about it more if you have any questions. So we really want this to really be tenant and landlord based decision making, not what we feel needs to be done. The other thing is we're also going to provide dispute resolution between tenant and landlords through conciliation or mediation. So if they just can't agree on anything and the tenant and the landlord both agree to a mediation, we offer mediation to them. And we try to come out with a resolution that they're both going to be happy with. And they may not agree with it totally, but at least they are agreeing to move forward in the manner that they decide to do it on. Also, we provide education, counseling, and procedural assistance in administering your ordinances that were passed. So that would be the just cause for eviction protection and rent stabilization. Also, the topics we talk about, as you know, are evictions, illegal entry, repairs, and habitability. We also speak to them about security deposit, retaliation, lease and rental agreements, other rights and responsibilities that they may have. What we also know is that sometimes they may call us because they think it might be a question about the ordinance, but it's really, you know, a habitability issue, right? So we would go ahead and try to find the proper entity that will assist them. Or if it's tied into the ordinances, then we will go ahead and try to help them the best that we can. We also talked a little bit about the mediation process, and it's facilitating communication between both parties, create mutually agreeable solutions between renters and property owners or managers, resolve conflicts without inundating the court system, which is why we talk about mediation, because mediation is sometimes just a misunderstanding on one side. And when we're all in the room, everyone is heard, and it usually becomes solution oriented at this point. Are there any questions? We did it nice and short and sweet to the point.
It looked like maybe one slide.
Oh, the
went
last slide
through.
is Jonathan's
Ah.
information. So it has our 855 number. Also, we created an email specifically for Larkspur that will go directly to Jonathan, and that is the Larkspur TPO@ecofairhousing.org.
All right, so let's start on this side this time. Any questions that you, first of all, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Any questions for our speaker? Yeah.
Christina, thank you for your presentation. I just have a clarifying question. So when people come to you for mediation, that is because they are, so the landlord is not trying to raise the rent above the cap, because I think then that goes to Dan. But this is when the landlord is within the cap, but they're still disagreeing, or there's still a dispute, and then they can go to mediation through your organization. Is that how I understand it? I'm trying to figure out where
So,
does
Mind
stuff
if I
go?
jump in,
Go ahead.
Christina?
Okay.
One of the values that I've spoken a little bit about in the past is that we're already experiencing, and even through the deliberations that resulted in the adoption of these ordinances, we started receiving calls from tenants and landlords, mostly tenants, that had really nothing to do with rent stabilization or eviction protections. It was, hey, can you help me out? I don't know who to call. I'm very concerned, frustrated, frightened. And so in some cities, mediation's baked into the ordinance as a way to resolve disputes about rent. We didn't do that here. So this mediation service would not be to resolve disputes specifically about the application of the ordinance, because you're correct, that would come through the city and go through the process that we've outlined.
Right.
Why we kept that in the scope of work when Christina and I worked out the details is I think it's quite possible they're going to get phone calls, and we want them to help everybody who calls. And they might get somebody who says, I just need help talking to the other party. And so this would be an opportunity to say, well, one of the things we could do is if the other party's willing, we could get you together and we can see if we can work this out. I think they'll be doing that infrequently, but I think it's a nice addition to their scope of work to be able to offer that to tenants and landlords. Because I have had my eyes open. We've had folks calling because they don't know how to tell their landlord they have mold. We've had people call saying they don't know how to tell their tenant, I'm going to sell my property, and I don't know I actually don't know the process of telling them I'm going to sell the property. And so those are the types of things now ECHO will deal with for us. They're better informed. They will be more responsive. We're just not trained in that material.
Right, that's good. That clarifies things. But now my question is this wrapped into your normal scope of services, or do we pay by the hour for these type of services?
Echo's contract is time and material entirely, so we only pay them when they do work for us. And so somebody calls them and then we're paying for the hour that they might serve that call.
Okay, okay. So this would be wrapped within the confines of the contract that we approved the last council meeting,
Correct.
not on top of. So it would be all within
That's
the
right.
scope of that. Okay,
Right.
great. Thank you.
Yes. So we've had a lot of testimony when we were discussing rent control about the value and the services of the Legal Aid Society of Marin. Where does this, where do we fit in with referring people to that organization? Or should we be referring them to legal aid also?
So, we have other contracts just like this one. We just are starting the Concord one as well. What we do is we're the step before it goes to legal aid or
Okay.
to any legal agency. And sometimes the legal agencies are bombarded with other cases, right? So we try to mediate, for lack of a better word, right? Try to figure out how to work with them to be able to resolve it so it does not go into the court system.
Okay. So that'll be evident on our website or whatever we do to provide information to the community that is also an option they have, but the preference is to start here with some dispute resolution first.
Well, I have
Yes.
to tell you anecdotally, we're hearing from Legal Aid of Marin. They're inundated right
now.
now. And so I don't know. I think I would love to talk to other agencies about the value of putting something between those types of resolutions. And it's a more cost-effective and more human touch approach to helping part of our population than telling them that they have to go get legal assistance right away. Because as Christina's talking about, I think a lot of these disputes are just people not communicating.
So there won't be a charge that we're paying, the contract is being paid for by the city. So individual property owners or tenants won't be charged for your services.
Correct.
Okay. And then just one last thing, which is just sort of one of my issues. I'm always looking for sort of gender neutral language and other language that's more relevant. And we had this conversation when we were discussing rent control, that landlord is not a neutral term, but you do use it a couple of times in here. And then you also use property owner. I would encourage to decide which one, and preferably property owner, or because it is a more neutral language than landlord, but that's just my own semantic.
We can do that.
It's only
can do
my semantic desire to see that that's a less threatening term for some people.
Okay, thank you. Gabe?
Yeah, thank you. So just two short questions. I guess the time and materials part would probably imply that you're dealing with, responding to inbound requests, but is there any place for sort of proactive or outbound? Like if you see at a particular complex, you've gotten 3, calls that you would recommend that the city post something on their website or hold a workshop if there's a larger number. Because I think the one-off is probably extremely helpful, but sometimes there's an economy of scale if you see a pattern. And I'm wondering if, first from your experience in the 3 other counties, and then if that's part of our contractual agreement.
Yes, actually, we did speak about that a little bit today, that if there was something that has come up and it keeps coming up, that we're going to be in constant communication with Dan and just let him know, like, hey, this is what's happening. We've gotten 4 calls for the same property, or the landlord is having, issues with their tenants in this one complex. Let's talk about how we can support each other and support the tenants and the landlords. I did let Dan know that we are also open to providing a tenant landlord workshop right at the very beginning, because I think a lot of the calls that we're going to be getting are people that may not fully understand the ordinance, or be in panic, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And we are more than happy to do that as well. And also May is Tenant Landlord Month. So we're excited to be able to do that during this month of May. So those are things that we can do, but our goal is to keep in constant communication with Dan. We talked about having a Google sheet where he has access to it and he can see exactly where we are, who we're working with, and what the resolution was, if there was one.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And the fact that you've assigned a person with an email, and as the city manager was saying, the personal touch, I think that can be very de-escalating. So I appreciate that. One last question, kind of to piggyback on Councilmember Way's comment about referrals. So I'm imagining part of what is going to resolve a conflict between the tenant and the property owner, would be steering them to certain resources. It may be an inspection, it may be, and what's your familiarity or your, how are you going to deploy that or be able to provide that information?
We had a conversation last week with Shannon and Dan via Zoom. Jonathan was part of that as well. We met again today about being able to figure out the best communication method to do that. So one of the things was Jonathan was going to be doing homework and he was going to be looking at the different agencies that you all have here in Larkspur. And if we have a question or we're stuck, then we would ask Shannon or Dan, hey, do you know where we can refer this person to, get the number and everything and pass it on to the caller. And if we don't have it right away, we are going to call them back. And let them know what the information is. We do want to let you know that we have gotten some people already calling us. So we already started our list and we were waiting for May 1st to come, which was today. And we were going to be calling them back and letting them know, okay, here we're starting the program. Let's talk about what it is that you're asking and what you're looking for. So we really want to make sure that we do the best thing for both tenants and landlords.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I actually don't have any questions, so thank you very much. My only comment is to staff. I am concerned in the fact that the rent stabilization, tenant protections are brand new. And I'm a little in the dark what the costs are going to end up being on this program. So I would just ask maybe quarterly to give council updates so we can not let things get out of control if they look in a direction or we need to make some adjustments, that we don't let it go too far down that road before we have to address it. Does that sound reasonable?
We'd be happy to bring you quarterly updates and then want to remind the council that ultimately you'll be having a discussion after we've had a year of costs to evaluate how much, if not all, that cost you want to recover through the rental registry program. And so you'll get a very detailed report. But we're hoping that once we've had the program in place for a year, we'll have a much better sense of what a typical month of cost looks like.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that was our last presentation. Next on the calendar is the consent calendar. Consent calendar are things that are normally not controversial and we don't bring them up for discussion. At this point, we like to ask first council if there is anything you'd like to talk about on the consent calendar before we vote on the consent calendar. Councilmember?
Mayor, I do have a request to pull 4.5 and not necessarily for discussion, but for extra time. So I've asked for some additional data and I would just like some time to review that data, if that's okay. And just as a broader comment, since we are in the middle of budget season, I think it'd be helpful to evaluate that item in context of the full budget. And so, and I understand the budget is coming soon. So anyways, I'm requesting more time to review the information that I've asked for.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Would anybody like to poll or discuss anything other than 4.5? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to poll or discuss any item on the consent calendar other than 4.5? Yeah, come on up.
Don't have the agenda in front of me, but I believe it's item 8.1.
Not there yet.
Okay, so the consent calendar are for non-controversial issues. 8.1 is a business item. So
Oh, it's a
we're going to be
business
having a full discussion on that. All right. Okay, anybody else out there for something on the consent calendar other than 4.5? Seeing none, can I get a motion for the consent calendar other than 4.5?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Okay, can I get a roll call on the consent calendar excluding 4.5?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way,
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes. Okay, now let's go back to 4.5 and let me ask staff. As far as I would like to address concerns, I've, received emails, the question to put this over. I don't know if that would be appropriate. Could you please let us know maybe the pros and cons of putting it over so we can decide if we should try to handle the issue today or if it wouldn't be an issue to put it over to the next meeting?
So maybe for the benefit of the public, since
What is
no one's made a
4.5?
reference. to What item 4.5 is an amendment to my employment agreement.
Yes.
And the reference from Councilmember Andres, she's asked for information about my compensation in the past years, which will be provided to the council as well. From a timing standpoint, everything in that agreement, except one item, doesn't take effect until July. So generally you have some time to resolve that matter. I think in light of the statement from Councilmember Andre that my compensation and agreement might be contingent on the budget, I think that might be perceived publicly as incentivizing me to misrepresent the budget. So I think that might cost me some heartburn, and I'd like to maybe ask for a closed session discussion with the council about my personal review.
Okay, I agree that would be appropriate, that we can discuss in this closed session. Let me take a second and just explain to the public the process for determining the contract for our city manager. We have a process that we go through each year. It's an evaluation where first the city manager will give us his interpretation of issues and how they've been going and things that we need to deal with moving forward. Then two members of the council speak with the city manager. It's the mayor, and it's usually either the past mayor or the vice mayor. This year it was myself and the vice mayor. We met with the city manager. We went over all the issues from the past year, potential issues for the coming year. We do a city manager evaluation where we went through a complex matrix of our interpretation of his performance over the past year, things that were done well, things that could be improved. And then we discussed whether the proposed package makes sense. Both Vice Mayor and myself went through it, and we felt that it was appropriate to pass that the new package for him. And it is all, I don't know, public wise, the details of the package, they're public or what I am.
It's in the agenda item, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So people are welcome to look.
So it's all public information. You're welcome to look at it. But it's based on, like I said, the performance of city manager, comparable city manager rates, both in Marin and other areas. And as I said, we went through it and felt very comfortable with it. I can say from my evaluation, I think the city manager has been doing a fantastic job. And I'm very happy with the work that he's been doing. And I think he deserves the package that's out there. But I am going to ask, instead of just having the two of us make that decision, we could put it maybe at the next meeting on a closed session. We can discuss it with the four of us and make sure council feels it's appropriate as well. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fine, Mr.
Okay, and does that address your question?
Can I just make one comment?
Sure.
I mean, I am not disputing the process that has been undergone and the review that's already happened. I'm absolutely not disputing that. I have asked for additional information, just so I understand what it is I'm approving, if I'm being asked to approve it. And my comment about the budget was really, being able to evaluate this item, but also other items on the agenda that are coming forward in context of the broader budget. That was my intent. I feel like we're starting to get requests for fiscal 2025 items. And, some items we need to pass because we don't stop the operations of the city while we're in budget season. But there are some items where I feel like, it'd be better if we could just evaluate in the totality of the budget. So that was the request. It wasn't it was not to, insinuate that there was anything inappropriate going on in the budget or the budget process or the review process.
No, and I appreciate that, and I agree with that, and I think the budget in general is making choices. You have a limited amount of money and you have to figure out where that money is going to be best spent. So I saw that comment as completely appropriate. I think we have some budget numbers that we're already looking at, and we can look at this package compared to past packages. And I think it's probably more appropriate to do it in a closed session.
Okay.
That's all. Okay.
So,
Agree.
so, I think our city attorney just raised his mic.
Well, as long as I'm talking, I'll go. I was going to defer, but as long as I'm already talking, I just wanted to clarify one thing for the benefit of the public. The materials related to the city manager's employment agreement and the proposed amendments are part of the packet and available for review. Since there was also discussion of self-evaluation and evaluation by council members, that is confidential personnel information and not available to the public.
Right.
Thank you.
So I'll agree to defer 4.5 for one more meeting. Because I think we're not privy to that conversation because it happened prior to the election and Councilmember Carroll was a participant at that time. So I don't think Councilmember Andre has had enough time to have that opportunity to review that. So I agree with that. But also the realization is that we are about 1.5 to 2 years behind on a evaluation of the city manager because of everything that happened with our schedule last year and other issues that came up last year. And he has been very patient in waiting for what could be considered a yearly evaluation and review that every employee undergoes during their contract. So I think within the next 2 weeks, a lot of that information will be available to you, but I'd like to have us make a decision at the next meeting and not make this go out further out of professional courtesy.
Agreed. Anything you wanted to add to that? No, thank you. Okay, so yes, so let's we'll pull that item. We'll put it on the closed session, and then if we also put it on the consent calendar, I guess next meeting as well. After the closed session, we can discuss it in open session on closed on the consent calendar. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Now moving to the next item, city manager's oral report.
This is going to be a first from Mr. Mayor, kind of fun, but I want to make the public aware of some exciting things that our recreation department are doing. And the first for me is saying we're having a sunset disco party at Piper Park this Friday, May 3rd. And dancing starts 7:45-ish. People are encouraged to come as early as 6:30. I understand it's silent disco, meaning you wear headphones and everybody gets to enjoy you gyrating with the headphones on. So should be fantastic. I encourage everybody to go out. Definitely a first for me to promote that. The other thing that I also want to make folks aware of is that the schedule for our music in the park for this summer is also now available. And I encourage folks to go to the events page on our recreation portion of the city website. And when you're there, both of these events are prominently displayed. You'll see the dates for the different music in the park sessions and which bands are performing. So, and we really want to thank our community partners who are coming forward to help sponsor music in the park. It was very well received last year and we're excited about it again this year. There you go, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Now we slide into council member reports. Mr. Paulson, Councilmember Paulson, would you like to start us off?
I'd love to. I'll try to be brief. I feel I've been a busybody. I have 4 items. I'll be as brief as possible. I was at the SMART board today and the board meeting, and we're in budget season as well. And, I I'll be completely honest. I've served on MWPA and I consider that the poster child of success. I'm on flood zone 9, which I consider the poster child of failure. And to me, SMART is somewhere teetering in the middle and you see it in the IJ all the time. But I'm really pleased to see that that this month, April, or the past month, April 2024, SMART broke its ridership record. It got 80,000 people in a month, and it's never done that before. It's 37% over the highest. And part of it is promotion. So any of you in the room, any of you listening online, it looks like 2 people. This is not much of a bully pulpit. Seniors are free. And youth 18 and under are free. And I'm also really encouraged. I've been pushing as our Larkspur rep to see what SMART can do for us. And finally, the entire board and the general manager conceded that in June, they're going to try to put a shuttle service in Larkspur. So we'll have microtransit, and the idea is with, obviously the ferry, but then there's Bon Air and there's Marin Mart and there's, Corte Madera. We really want to make this something that has economic value, maybe bring traffic. It's good for our tax base. So I'd really like to see that agency succeed. And so today was a good day for that. And I think the budget is being well deliberated. I'm also serving on the TAM board. I think this is the year where we get overloaded. One of the big issues that was in the IJ is the crossing guards. You may have read that. I have a 6-year-old. I ride every day to Neil Cummins. I love the crossing guard there. There are 104 of them in Marin, and we just don't have enough money. And so I think a very good decision was reached, and that was to trim it back just a little, because the baseline had always been about 80-ish or so, and trim it back to 96, and then wait and see, and possibly to 85 in 2026. And the kids' safety is obviously a huge priority. So a lot of analysis similar to the way we, Julian, looks at crosswalks and uses matrices to decide went into this. And I was pleased that I think, the balance between fiscal responsibility and public safety was struck. So that was decided last week. 2 more things. I've been trying to, raise our voice and our Larkspur concerns with the state a little bit more. So on March 21st, I went to the CPUC, the Public Utility Commission in San Francisco, and I got up for public comment. And the point that I was trying to advocate was that the landlines that AT&T and other companies are trying to get out of, that's something that is allowable. But in areas like Madrone Canyon, I think that's something that we really should force them to have some statutory obligation to provide in places where cell reception is not okay. So I made that comment. David Connolly has been reinforcing that comment. I'm going to be talking to him. I really think that's a safety factor. I've, driven up to the end 300 of Madrone, and I really feel that's an incredibly risky area. And we have to think about their communication. And just like Steve Torrance, that's a system we have to think about. The other one was, I just got a call today from my insurance company. A lot of you have fire insurance, and now my insurance company is asking me to take pictures all around my home to see if I have defensible space. I've served on this agency for 4 years. You would think I trimmed every eucalyptus bush, but I haven't. But what I did is I attended on April 23rd the catastrophic modeling that the Commissioner Lara put on, and right now, I'm really not happy. I think what we have to advocate and tell the state is that we need a public risk model. We can't just have every company like State Farm having there and gaming the system. I think there has to be common public data. What is the risk level of your home, and set rates according to that risk level. It has to be more transparent. So I will continue to advocate that point. I think we'll do that through various agencies like MWPA and Office of Disaster Management. But this is a huge issue for our town, for the County of Marin. People are finding their home insurance going up or becoming non-existent. And I really hope that even as a small, player in the city council, we can continue to advocate for the public. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Gabe. Councilmember Andre?
I just have one update. The Golden Gate Bridge District is proposing to build a $75 million 3-story parking structure at Larkspur Ferry Terminal. at the parking lot. And so they're having a public forum so that people can come and learn more about the project and also make their views known. It is being held at on Tuesday, May 14th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Drake's Landing. So if anyone who's interested in learning more about this project or you have an opinion and want to make your opinion known, I would encourage you to attend the meeting.
That's turning out to be a great location for a lot of meetings lately. If anybody doesn't know where it is, it's very convenient for parking. I think, well, we went to a couple of meetings together. Do you want to talk about the South Alicio and the Commons presentation?
You, as you
Okay.
wish.
So the mayor and I attended the Camel Pius last Friday and spoke to the residents in a presentation with the Commons Foundation President Ann Morrison and Serena, who is their development director, about the current status and process of the library and community center. So that was, and the library director went with us too, Damon, and it was a very nicely attended. And it was a good presentation. I think that was given as a joint group. I think the second meeting that happened in the last week is the mayor and I also are both our representatives to the Project Home Key on South Alicio. And there was a Zoom meeting last Thursday. Really, the Public Safety Committee, which we've both been serving on, was updated. All the stakeholders were asked to attend to give a update on some transition issues that they had initially when the building was residents first moved in, and some issues that came up with some of the tenants, which have now been resolved, I thought, to the best of the satisfaction of this committee. And I felt that their interaction between the county and the HHS and our supervisor Rice with our local law enforcement was exemplified that they were working very collaboratively together. So that was pretty much it.
Thank you. And yeah, just to, on that last note, with the Project Home Key, just to let people know, I'm usually the jerk in the room. You know, just trying to hold people responsible for their promises, things like that. And as a very one of the more critical people in that room, I was impressed that it was moving forward in a good direction. They were working collaboratively to solve problems, and things are much better than they were at the prior meeting. So I think we are moving in the right direction. And we'll keep you informed as we have future meetings. And with that, I will close the council member reports. We can now move on to public hearings. Public hearing item 7.1, introduction of ordinance 1073, amending chapter 6.20 of the Larkspur Municipal Code to add a sunset provision to the rent stabilization regulation. Can we get a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Sometimes administrative mistakes actually prove to be helpful. And in this case, oddly enough, I think it has been helpful because with respect to the ordinance 1067 that was reaffirmed by Measure D, we discovered in preparing it with the company that helps us compile and publish our municipal code that during the final process of recordation, the sunset provision that the council clearly within the record wanted attached to the ordinance had dropped out. It's appropriate to have you correct that. It's a little larger than a city manager administrative correction. But in doing that, we also realized that there was various discrepancies in what the council had said at different times, what you ultimately directed us to do with respect to when that sunset provision would be. So the happy opportunity is for you to complete that conversation and be certain what you meant to do. We went back and looked at the record and discovered you had actually explicitly told us that the date you wanted in the ordinances was the end of the end of the year that AB 14 sunsets. So
1480.
you said it, sorry. You said it at just December of 2030, but the law, the state law is January. And at different times in the discussion, when we went back and looked, you said different things. So we wanted you as a group of four to have this opportunity to tell us what it was that you ultimately wanted to do, because there were times when you said, line it up exactly with the Tenant Protection Act. And then when you made the motions, you specifically had said December. So our administrative mistake that we brought to you to correct gives you a chance to talk about this broader question and give us direction.
Okay.
And we do direction on this ordinance, and then also we'll have to agendize at some point 1068 if you decide to move to the January date.
Okay, thank you for that report. And my memory is we wanted it to be consistent with state law. I think it was probably an error on our part saying the end of the law. Some of us probably thought end of the year. Some of us probably thought that the state law ended at the end of the year. I would suggest that we make it consistent with state law unless anybody up here has a different understanding or memory of our conversation.
Gabe, you were.
Yeah, no, and I think that's
I
exactly
think
right.
it's more consistent with.
Yeah,
state
I
law.
mean, just, 30-second, background. I think the spirit of the ordinance was to take law and work within that framework. And, we took the cap, and we thought the main lesson from COVID was when there are times of high inflation, it can be extremely painful and disruptive to a lot of people. And that's why we decided to go from 10 to 7. But otherwise, holding the sunset to me was a way of also, in the spirit of an ordinance that can be adjusted and discussed and flexible, would mean we're not trying to rewrite, property rights or entitlements. So yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, let me, as this is a public hearing, open up to the public. Is there anyone that would like to comment on the sunset date of our renter protections? Seeing none, do we need a motion on this for staff?
Yes, we will need a motion on which date you want. This is a first reading, so we'll bring it back with the date you tell us for the second reading and adoption. And then we'll also bring 1068 if you're choosing the
Yep.
January date.
Fair enough. Can I get a motion from?
Yes, so I'll move that we are consistent with the California State Tenant Protection Act and have the sunset clause be January 1st, 2030, which coordinates with the California state law.
Second.
Okay, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes. Okay, are we, anything else you need on 7.1?
We will bring this back and then we'll have it all cleaned up.
Fantastic. Let's move on to 7.2, introduction of ordinance 1074 relating to the compensation of city council members. Can we get a report on that?
Mayor was, sorry,
No worries.
city attorney was making sure I had noted something. We're good.
We're good? Okay.
Okay. So item 7.2 is a public hearing for the council to consider whether it wants to amend the compensation that goes to council members. And before I get into the discussion, I want to make sure everybody understands that this body today is not voting on its compensation that takes effect tomorrow. You'll be making decision about this. And then if you do vote to change the compensation amount, it takes effect after the next general election. So it wouldn't take effect until effectively January of next year. So what so we're a general law city. And a general law city is its governing document at the end of the day, besides its municipal code, is the general law provisions of state government code. That's distinct from a city like San Rafael, which is called a charter city. And San Rafael residents from time to time are asked to amend their charter, their constitution, which has a broader set of parameters and powers in it. It came to the attention of the legislature that there had not been any room really in the general law provisions for general law cities to determine if the compensation levels that they've been offering should be adjusted. And so Larkspur, like many cities, hadn't looked at the issue of what you receive essentially as a stipend for performing your duties. We hadn't looked at it in over 30 years, 32 years. So this new law that passed gives you an opportunity to decide as a group if you'd like to adjust to the parameters set forth now in the general law provisions. And effectively, what that amounts to when you apply the formula in the code is that you're considering whether you would like to move the stipend that you receive monthly, which right now is $275 for a council member and $330 if you're serving as the mayor. And it would move all of you to $950 for your monthly stipend. And so that's essentially what you're deliberating today. You are not required to move it to 952. You could pick some other number that you would like to pick. That's what the formula works out that you should move it to. So, and you are not obligated to move it at all, Mr. Mayor. So those are that's what's before you, and it's your item to discuss. I think you're going to see a lot of cities, general law cities, taking this up over the next few months because it's just sort of takes time to digest that this new law passed and get it in the hopper.
All right, well, thank you for that. I guess I'll share quickly. My thoughts on this are more of an equity issue that I would like to see a wider spectrum of financial representation up here on the city council. And I think that by increasing the salaries or the stipend of city council members, it may allow some people who otherwise would not be able to afford to spend the time to be a city council member to have an opportunity to do this. For that reason, I am in favor of this. I will start by opening up to council and then we'll open it up to the public.
So this was a conversation that came up, I'm the representative to the Marin mayors and council members legislative committee for Larkspur. And this we discussed last year. It really is an equity issue that is statewide, maybe not necessarily in this dais or others near us, but it's a real issue in many communities that there are not sufficient numbers of individuals in their community who will step forward and run to sit in a position like this because of work constraints, of family constraints, of other things. That public service of this type has to now really be realistically balanced in their financial and economic needs that they have within their family. So reason why the legislature went forward with this is to try to open up that opportunity to other members of communities who have maybe underrepresented on councils and that this may be an incentive, a greater incentive. So I completely agree that we need to make sure that we are, I mean, it's still public service, but the compensation may be just the tipping point that will allow some members of our community to say, well, I think I could do it now because I will be able to have a little extra for that time and service that I'm giving. So it was the League of California Cities was very supportive of this because there are many rural communities in California that are really struggling to get people to step forward to run for election and to serve in this role because they just do not have any compensation for their time and service. So I think we should follow the guidelines that were given here.
Councilmember Andre.
I agree with the previous comments about equity. This position certainly takes time. My own comment would be, okay, I have one question. Does the mayor, it looks like the mayor only, do we need to give the mayor something extra? Or do we want to give the mayors commensurate with what was happening prior to this? It looks like the memo just says everybody goes to 950.
So there's two responses.
Okay.
One is the city attorney sort of chuckled and told me he's not 100% sure it was ever kosher in the past to have distinguished
Oh.
what the mayor
Okay.
made from what the council members made, but neither of us knows what happened in 1993
Okay.
to do that. Secondly, when you apply the formula, it ends up that you make them equal because the way the formula works out, you hit this cap, which is 950.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And then did I read in here that the total impact to the budget was like $39,000 for fiscal 2025? I think I read that.
So that a total year increase is the 39,840 because this would take place in January. For the next fiscal year, it'd be half that amount.
I see. Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess my only comment would just be because we are going to be reviewing the budget shortly. I had thought maybe we might stagger it, but it sounds like it's a half a year, fiscal year type of increase. Anyways, I am open to whatever the rest of council wants to do. My only inclination would be, I would prefer to see the budget numbers again, just because I don't like making a decision in a vacuum, but if people want to make a decision on this today, I'm happy to make a decision on it.
I just had a few questions. Just to confirm, the 300 or 270, that was set in 1992 and it hasn't changed since.
32 years,
Okay.
spend the same.
Okay.
It
And
was meant to cover your telephone bill. That's what I would
and one other thought is either in the language of the state legislation or, how we're looking at it here through the staff report. I'm wondering a little bit about a domino effect. So if we, say this is going to hold for staff, what about the 25 other, commission, like the planning commission members and the park commission members and that?
So there are no stipends, or I will acknowledge the law calls it a salary. I just have a hard time saying $950 or $225 constitutes a salary. You don't provide a stipend for boards and commissions. That's a volunteer position.
Okay. And, I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I mean, I think the equity issue and, just anecdotally, I remember, I really, honoring Kevin Carroll, I remember having these discussions with him and, he represented such an important part of the community and also, asked, as some of us here try to get people involved and money was an issue. So that to me was, and I was actually going to text all the people I know who've run and, who I knew were lower income or working moms or whatever, and just sort of see if this mattered. But I believe we really need to do this. But the question I had though was, I also like the service ethic of it, that we are volunteers and, for the public perception, there isn't an opt-out possibility. Is there, if someone says, I don't really, I want this to go to the other council members or back into the general fund, is there that option?
So some council members in the past have asked us to use their stipend to make a charitable donation, and we've helped facilitate that through the payroll system for them. That's your own personal election, but you still receive it as income before it becomes the charitable donation. I don't actually know the answer if they could just say they don't.
I have with another city prepared a fairly simple form for a council member to decline to receive the compensation. There's really no law on this either way. But it is set in the ordinance that you're supposed to receive it. But I also could not find anything when that community asked to state that you must accept it. And so we prepared a form just to say, I don't want to receive this compensation, basically leave it in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think based on, what we're all saying and the equity need, and then I also just ran a quick inflation calculator. I think in today's dollars, it's $667. So we're really, giving enough for us to go to In-N-Out Burger a few more times. I'm in support.
But I appreciate your comment about Councilmember Carroll because, he was an independent contractor. He worked for himself. And so he, as an example of an individual who wanted to step forward and serve the community, every time he was working here, he was missing out on fares. He was missing out on any type of work that he could have received as an independent contractor. So that's an example of someone who could serve and benefit for the financial hit that it was taking to lose income, perhaps lose income from his independent work. So
I'm ready to make a motion if the council.
All right, hold on. Let's, this is a public hearing, so let's turn it over to the public. Is there anyone who has a comment they would like to make on this agenda item regarding compensation for council members? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and now we can bring it back to dais. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'd like to.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to move on staff's recommendation.
second,
Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor White. Mayor
Yes.
Kendall.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Going to business items 8.2.
8.1, Mr. Mayor.
8 point, whoops, wrong one. Okay. Going to 8.1, Larkspur City Hall Facility Renovation Study. Budget amendment and consulting services agreement with Page and Trumbull in the amount not to exceed $232,000. Can we get a staff report?
This is the extra.
Good evening, members of council, members of the public. Julian Skinner, I'm the Public Works Director. So tonight we have a follow-up. We've been before you a few occasions in the past, speaking about the condition of this building. As you know, we've had some preliminary condition assessments performed in conjunction with the new library project and understanding that the library was going to vacate part of this building. We had some very rough order of magnitude costs for upgrading this building at the time, and we said we would come back to you and we would take a look further at this building once we got the library project up and running. So we're working along with the design build team on the new library, and so now we're coming back and we're still doing that, but we're also gonna take a look at this building. So there's two components to the requested action tonight. One is that you amend the capital improvement program. So this is not currently a project in the adopted CIP. We had it penciled in as we're developing the budget for next year, starting July 1st, but we've gone through the RFP process and we're ready to get going. So we thought we'd bring it forward now. So that would require a budget amendment for you to add those funds into this year's capital improvement program, so we could start the work now instead of waiting till July. And then the second part of the request tonight is that you authorize us to sign a contract with Page and Turnbull for the study that I will talk about. So just again, the brief history of this building, 108, that's old. I think it's 110 now. This is a slide I took from a presentation a couple of years ago. We've gone over some of the issues. As you know, there's no fire sprinklers in the building. We have a lot of accessibility challenges to various parts of the building. And we don't really know what would happen to this building in a strong earthquake. In addition to those things that we know that are missing from the building, the things that are in the building, a lot of them are old. They're at the end of their serviceable life, which means the lights are still on today, but tomorrow they could go out and it could be a very costly, expensive repair to get them back on. And you could say that for the heating and the ventilation and the air conditioning system. The elevator, the alarm systems that are in the building, these are all old and they've been patched over the years. And to add on top of all that, the last time we did a renovation project here, the end cost was about double what we thought it was to begin with, because every time we open up a wall to do something, we ran into more issues. And so back when we did the preliminary study a couple of years ago, we said we estimated it would be about $12 to $18 million to renovate this building. It raised a lot of eyebrows about the cost. So we said, we'll come back. A lot of components to this building. There's the historical aspect and a lot of unknown structural issues. So late last year, we did issue a request for proposals for consultant services to provide a more detailed analysis of this building. So we're looking for professional services. So this is historical architects and structural engineers, accessibility professionals that could take a deeper look into this building and give us a report on what the issues are. In addition to that, we wanted to know what options would we have for renovating the building. And so in the RFP, we asked them to look at what would it take to get another 5 years out of this building, or say another 20 to 30 years, which would be a pretty comprehensive renovation. And then also a final scenario is, what if we wanted to end up with a building that was as good as if we built it from scratch today? So a 50 to a 100-year building. And then also with the library moving out, we understand that there will be a big portion of the building that's vacant. And so what happens with that space and what happens with the rest of the space if it gets reorganized or things get moved around? Some of those things will play into some of those renovation options. So we understand that at some point in this process, we're going to need some feedback from folks on some of the options of what we may do with the building. Because at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a report that's going to look at the building. It's going to tell us the issues with the building, and it's going to have some costs for what we may want to do with it. So we want to get feedback on what some of those, what do we want to do with the buildings are before we finish the report. Whoops, I did that. So in response to the request for proposals, we got 6 architectural teams that submitted. We reviewed them all. As you can imagine, a lot of historical architecture expertise in a lot of these proposals. They were all good proposals. One of them did stand out. That was the proposal by Page and Turnbull. And so again, this is a request for proposals. It's not a bid, so we don't just take the lowest number. We take the proposal that is deemed the best for the city. So that's the best qualifications, the best understanding of what our needs are, and the best plan to deliver us what we're asking for in the RFP. And all of the teams are given what the scoring criteria is as part of the RFP, so they know what they're going to be scored on. And that's how we landed on Page and Turnbull. They have a lot of historical expertise on staff. The 2 main principals that would work on this project both live in Marin, close to this building. They know Larkspur, they know Marin. They have an extensive catalog of these historical structure reports, which is the main component that we want out of this. And they structured their proposal with a list of items of here's what you really should do. Here's some other things that may help the effort, but maybe not necessarily. And so we were able to take their proposal and come up with the fee that I showed that we're recommending award based on a combination of what they suggested were here's the basic needs for your project, and here's some things that will give you a better product that we think is a good bang for the buck. And so that fee that I showed before, the 232,000, that's a not to exceed limit. So they've given us about 7 categories of things they're going to do with a cap on how much they would spend. The way that our contracts are structured, it's not to exceed time and materials. So they bill us for work in stages that they're authorized to do by the Public Works Director. So I authorize stage 1, some kickoff, and then the historical structures report. And then we review it, and then we authorize them to work on the next, and then we review their billings. And so that's a not to exceed. There are some things that may make that fee go down. As we get into some of these tasks, we may get about 20-30% in, and they say, we can already tell where this is going by what we've done so far. You don't need to spend the next $10,000-$15,000. We are 95% know what it's going to say, and we'll go with that, and we'll move on, and we'll save that money off of the contract. Or if there's something we need to do more somewhere else, then we'll spend that money there. And then as we go through the public process and we get feedback, there may be some options that we just are not worth pursuing cost-wise. And so there may be some parts of the formal report that we just don't end up doing because there's no point doing cost estimate if that's not a viable outcome for the building. This is kind of round numbers, the tasks that they will be undertaking. There's going to be some meetings, there's going to be site visits, it's going to be very hands-on. There will be architects, engineers, electricians walking through the building, looking at things, tapping on things, taking covers off, and really looking into what the components are and what the issues are with them. And then they'll go away and they'll come up with a way to renovate, fix, replace based on certain scenarios. We will get something called a historic structures report, which will outline, it will look at the history of the building and all of the Secretary of the Interior standards, and it will let us know what we can and cannot do with the building to meet all those standards and to keep the historic district designation that the downtown has. So that's the historic structures report part 1. That's the assessment part of it. Part two of the historic structures report is then telling you what it looks like when you start changing things and the costs that are associated with those changes. So number one is the assessment of what is not touchable. And then part two is more of the structural side of things as you start moving things and you have to say, for example, let's say that the facade of the building needs to stay for historic purposes. That's part of the assessment. The part two of the assessment will say, how does that affect the costs and the improvement options you have in renovating the building moving forward? So those are the biggest chunk, the most detailed items that you'll see in here. There's some other line items for doing the cost estimating. They're going to do a laser scan of the building. So this is in lieu of looking over hundreds of out-of-date plans and putting them all together and building a computer model. They bring a laser in and it does a little scan of all the rooms and it is able to build a 3D model of the entire building. And that's pretty standard in today's business of how they get accurate plans. So we don't go back and digitize old plans. They just bring a laser in and it scans everything into all of the architectural modeling and CAD programs. So that'll be useful for some of the reports that they'll print out. And then it's also something that we'll own if we get to a point where we go into a follow-up stage where we're starting to look at drawing up plans for any renovations. We'll have this as part of our documents for that process. And then there is a line item here for the future building use evaluation. So this includes some public participation that I'll show in the next slide. And then the site analysis is one of those tasks where we may end up saving a little bit of money because our public works department actually has some capacity to look at some of the site analysis out here. And I think the biggest focus is going to be on the structure. There's only so many things we can do with the building. I think it's fair to say that if we were going to do a multi-million-dollar project up here, we'd probably be upgrading the sewer and the power and things like that from the street. So the addition of all those not to exceed items gives you a total not to exceed of 232. The final bill at the end of the day won't be that much. I don't know exactly how much it'll be. It'll kind of depend as what we uncover along the way. And we can certainly have touch points as we go through this and we can come back and report on where we are in the process. This is kind of an overview. I think if you've looked at their proposal, they had a little bit more of an aggressive schedule. But we've sat down and negotiated the fee with them as the 232,000. And we've also worked on a schedule where we think we've allowed a little bit more time for us to look at the deliverables and work with them on what we need to do in the next steps and also have those touch points with the public. So we're thinking about a 6 to 8 month process from when they start work until when we have a final report completed. And there's really the three major tasks, and there's some of those other components that are intertwined here, but it's the historical structure report is the first thing they'll get working on. That's the analysis. And then when that's getting going, they'll start working on the follow-up portions, such as what does it look like? What are the renovation options for the building? And for some of these, we'll have, this is where the public input will come. Probably our first touch point will be with a Heritage Preservation Board, where we'll go and kind of give an update on the process and we'll let them know what this is going to look like moving forward. We will have just started the historic structures report at that point. And then we anticipate a public workshop where we have a touch point with the public where we can let them know some of the information that we have, and we'll have a general idea on some of the costs. We won't have it all refined yet, but we'll be able to share some of what we've discovered with the public. And that's when we'll be looking for feedback from the public and the ideas that we can incorporate them when we look at the renovation options and what should we be analyzing in that final report. As far as what the building would look like. And then when we're almost done and we've captured all of that and we've got all the information from our consultants, we'll come back and we'll bring a draft report to you at a city council public meeting. And then we'll get the final input from the public and from the council on that, and then we'll work that into the final report. So that's a quick overview. Sorry, I thought I had one more slide. That's a quick overview. So again, there's the two requests. One is the budget amendment, and the other is the consultant services agreement with Page and Turtle. So I'm available for any questions.
Julian, thank you. Great report. Bring it up to council. Anybody have any questions? Councilman Andre, you want to give it a
Great.
start?
Sure, I'll get it started. Thank you, Mr. Skinner. So my questions have to do with the cost. It looks like in the proposal that was given to us by Page and Turnbull, and by the way, they're a highly reputable firm, and I've looked at some of their previous work, and it seems like it's a good choice that you've made. But according to their original proposal, it looks like they've got a basic scope of services and then more enhanced services. So which of these on your slide 4 or 8, I'm sorry, slide 8, are you proposing that we do some of the enhanced? I mean, I'm assuming we're going to do all of the basic that they're recommending, and then on the more enhanced services, which of those are you proposing that we take on, or that we do?
Yeah, so as you said, all of the basic are
Uh-huh.
needed to inform the future discussions. We
Yeah,
thought
sorry,
it was.
Allison, can you just put it one slide back? Thanks.
Okay. All of the basic, which is basically your some component, the meetings and the site visits is kind of split between basic and enhanced. But the two components of the historical structures report, your cost estimating, those are the basics, and then some little portion of the markup and the expenses. The others, the laser scan of the building is not required, but it's something that the city will be able to use. If we were to hire somebody and do as-built and measurements of the building for anything that we're doing here moving forward, that's going to be something that we're going to need. And based on the other proposals, this was actually a very reasonable price that they gave us. Some of the others were almost 4 times that. So that's why this one is an enhanced, we thought had value into the contract. And then the future building use evaluation was not a basic, because you don't need that for the historic structures report. But we thought, based on the conversations and the public interest in the past in this project, that we wanted to have that public touch point, and we wanted to have some conversation about what the building use might be for the final report, so that we didn't have a report and then we had to go. We're still going to have public input after we have the report, but we wanted to have some of that before so it could inform the report, and we didn't have a report that had spent money on things that options that were not going to be viable for the community in the future. So that's really kind of part of the follow-up, but we thought there would be some merit to the process to include that sooner rather than later. And we haven't negotiated any of these individual fees down. They're shown as caps. Some of these I don't think will use the full allotment of what they said, because some of the enhanced components will probably do some of it, but maybe not all of it. That there was, I thought there was another one here. There was one that we didn't do at all. There's only one that we completely nixed, and that was the tier 3 structural analysis. So there's 3 levels of how you can analyze the structure of a building, and tier 1 is basically a checklist that says this looks bad, that looks bad, that's probably not good. Tier 2 is where you actually do calculations, you get down and you measure things and you do a structural analysis. A tier 3 is a much more in-depth analysis, where you're actually taking pieces of material to a lab and you're examining them and seeing what their strength is. And so they had that as an enhanced. We don't feel that we need to get into that level of detail. I think that a tier 2 will probably suffice. And depending on what we do with the building, if a lot of the building needs to be reconfigured, then there's no point spending money analyzing things if you know they're going to be taken out. So some component of all of the enhanced are in there, with the exception of the tier 3 that we didn't include at all.
Okay, great. And then my next question is on that future building use evaluation. So that includes meetings with the public and getting comments back. It feels like it's a very expensive step. Is there some of that we can front load or while they're doing the historic structure report, that we hold meetings on, and get comments from the public. I mean, I just feel like, I don't know why that step is that much money, but is there some of that where we can just hold a public meeting and get comments? And then we can provide better direction, as a council to Page and Turnbull. I don't know, but it feels like that's a pretty big line item right
Yeah,
there.
so I've summarized some of these
Uh-huh.
titles. So the $35,000 is not just to hold meetings. It's from, it's what we do with the information that comes from those meetings and developing some of the options and helping to inform some of what goes into the historic structured report part 2. Which for many projects if the part 2 would be what you do with the building, we anticipate that what you do with the building will have a few options. And so that's almost like the enhanced cost of you're going to get a draft report that's going to have a number of options in it. So that's a kind of an incremental cost that we're going to pay to carry a number of options through. Because we don't anticipate that we're going to finish this report and we're going to know exactly what we're going to do with the building. The idea is we finish this report and we've got better
With data,
costs
yeah.
and we've got better understanding of what the historical impacts are of doing certain things to the building. And then we will have community conversations after we have the final report. So yes, this could come down a little bit. The reason that we've got this a little bit further along in the process is when we have those workshops, we want to be able to present some context and some information to folks who are in those meetings as far as what we've discovered to date. And that, may sway them one way or another. For instance, if we realize that, we can't save any of the exterior of the building if we want to do a 30-year project. Then, that may influence some of what folks think the final use of the building should be. If they know it has to be completely rebuilt in the back, other than, the historical components. So that's the reason why we weren't going to have that public input right up front. We want to be able to share a little bit of information of what we've learned about the building so far when we have that, so we can share some information, then we can get feedback from the community.
Okay, great. Just one final comment. I do think it is important to get some public comments and incorporate comments from the public here, because this is a historic building with cultural significance, and obviously it's going to be very expensive. I think whatever options are put forward, and we're going to need, I think, support from the public to figure out how we fund this project. So I think it's very important that we make sure that we do involve the public from the start. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we need this study because we don't have the data right now. We rely on our own expertise within our own Department of Public Works, and we have community members who are kind of spitballing numbers, and we don't have the data right now. So I appreciate that you got 6 bids or 6 proposals. And that means we really had 6 different agencies, organizations that are skilled in this look at it. And I think there's a lot of information that we don't have in-house to know this, the integrity of the structure or the options. So I think it's necessary. The idea of what we're going to do with this building has been part of the conversation in this community for many, many, many years. And it's been something that a lot of people have ideas about, but this report will give us the actual factual data. And I think having that is going to be crucial in decision-making, whether we decide to make this, continue to keep this as a public use building or use it for some other purpose, then we'll have the information that will be available that way. So I think it's an important spending that we need to do because it's an issue, it's an asset that we have to make sure we know what's going on with it. I think the record needs to also reflect that I was one of the few who voted for us to put a new building. And I was outvoted, but it's in paragraph 2 that the council directed staff to not pursue a new building, which I think unfortunately we missed that opportunity at this point. As I walk by the brand new city hall that Corte Madera is erecting, I I lament the fact that we're not erecting a new city hall, but if we go forward with this, we'll at least know where we're going. That was my sidebar about how I,
Yeah, very
I wonder,
subtle.
a very subtle sidebar as I looked at my colleague over there.
I wonder if the mayor would indulge me for a moment, though, because I know something that Vice Mayor Way has spoken to a lot about, and because we emphasize the nature of this project is heavily about the measuring what we can and can't do with the building while maintaining its historic significance. I think in this particular presentation, unlike some of the others that Mr. Skinner's done, he didn't remind folks that we have to do that while also recognizing that once we start working on this building, it's out of compliance with a lot of rules and regulations around accessibility. And so we will have to make hard decisions. And part of this study and some of that expense is Page and Turnbull have the expertise to reconcile for us what the difficult choices are going to be that we have to make about preserving the historical frame and the historical look and feel of the building, but also complying with modern standards about accessibility.
Councilmember Paulson, your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, Julian, I want to thank you. I wanted to echo Councilmember Way's comment, 6 different companies, and I think Page and Turnbull, their work is all over in San Francisco and the Presidio, the library there and the Disney Museum and Pier 1. And I think we picked a good firm. I want to kind of go back to Councilmember Andre's point. I think, one of the, maybe you can unpack this a little bit for us. One of the dilemmas is projects often start with requirements. You require and then you assess. And here it's like circular. We could assess, but to what end? So maybe you can say a little bit more. So I don't dispute that the 35 or how many thousand is important, because it's clearly not just, something we do here, which could be much cheaper. I think this is a real retrofitting of public expectations, and maybe you can say a little more about where you see that going.
So as far as how many options we're going to work through and come back and again, I threw those numbers up there as caps. There is one thing definitively that we've asked them to do, and that's look at 3 stages of improvement: the 5 to 10 year, the 20 to 30, and then the long 50 to 100. What we haven't done for them is define what other options are you looking at. For example, you could completely renovate this building and just leave it as a shell so that somebody could come in and make it what they wanted it to be. Or you could renovate it so that it essentially functioned as it does today, with city offices upstairs and maybe a meeting room downstairs where the library is. I don't know how many of those different options. Obviously, we don't want too many, or you're going to get closer to that $35,000 number, because every iteration. So the major expenses are going to be in the structure and a lot of the things that are going to be common to whatever happens with the building. There are going to be some cost deltas in what the building is used for in the future, and whether you're finishing out inside or whether you're leaving it open as a shell for some other use. And I think that, we can probably have a better handle on what that number is going to be. So that's the part 2 of the historical assessment, and that 35,000 of the building options. After we have our first public workshop and we get some feedback and we talk with the team about, how different are these visions that we have for the building, and they may say 95% of the cost is going to be the same, because most of what we're looking at is the structure, and the inside finishing is not your big cost. And then that will bring some of those numbers way down, because we're not having to calculate a whole bunch of things. So I think it's hard for me to say at this point, because I don't know what it's going to look like after we have our first public workshop. I'd like to get some feedback and see where this is going to go. And then I'll have a better idea of how much of that 55,000 for the part 2 of the historic study, or how much of the 35,000 for the building options that we're going to spend. And that might be a good touch point to come back and give an update after we've got that first workshop. The other thing I do want to say is, for the most part, this 230, whatever this fee, and I won't say 232 because it won't end up being that much, but of what we spend on this, most of that money it's not just for a study that's going to go on the shelf. It's for work product that we would need to do for any renovation of this building. If we're going to do a significant rehabilitation, we need to do a historic structures report. We can't do a renovation project without that. So these are costs that are not throwaways for something that we're just checking a box. These are costs that are going to go towards whatever project we end up doing with this building. So they're part of the bigger, longer run expense.
Thank you. And just one more question. I'm less concerned about the fiscal discipline here. I mean, I think 232,000 is a lot of money, but I'm thinking ahead to the possible 10 to $20 million bill. And, I looked at, Page and Turnbull's, proposal and this, idea of, preservation technology kind of stood out. And I'm wondering, in their portfolio, if you saw examples where they kind of think outside the box and they find a way to, like one example comes to mind is there was a bid to replace a bridge in the middle of a park, and the bids were hugely high. And then someone came with a half bid and they just had a helicopter which flew the bid and lowered. So it was a kind of out of the box preservation technology. Did you find them to be more innovative than the other five? Because they're not just architects or design builders. They would actually be people we could engage to get the job done.
Yeah, I can't speak to anything specific of that nature, but one of the reasons they did score high marks was because they've done it from beginning to end. Not only have they done the historic structure reports and they have the historic architects on staff, but they've completed big renovation projects as the architectural team. Whereas some of the other proposals were teams where an architect was teaming up with a historical architect, and so they didn't have the continuity. I will say one of the things, it's not a construction technique, but one of the things that they did show that nobody else showed was they have a way of presenting the historical structures report and the analysis in a graphical way. So as part of that laser scan that I mentioned in the building model, they then can color code different sections of the building, and they can show exactly what the historical components of the building are, in case somebody doesn't know what a pilaster is or some long description. So they had a very user-friendly, I found, component of the historical structure report that I think will be helpful when we have conversations with the public about this building and what their interests are in and what's historically significant.
Great, thank you.
Dan, you got the mic on? What's up?
Well, another thought occurred to me I wanted to put out there too, that Julian's presentation didn't put a spotlight on. One thing I like about the way Julian structured this RFP is there's a lot of incentive for Page and Turnbull to perform for the community in phase one, because they're not guaranteed the work in phase 2 and 3. And I think, keep in mind, they're going to be interested in winning that opportunity from you. So I think we've baked into this proposal and the way this agreement's being structured an incentive for them to work efficiently on phase 1.
All right. I got a couple questions. It's a big number, Julian, and I'm struggling with it. It's given the size of our budget, dropping $250,000 to get somebody's opinion about what you go forward with, when we have no idea if we even have the funding to go forward in the first place. I mean, if we get a number and it's like, oh yeah, it's whatever, $15 million, where are we getting that 15 million from? So I guess my first question is, are we putting the apple before the cart before the horse, or whatever the saying is, so that should we kind of hear from the public, see if there's an appetite for a bond measure, or figure out how we're going to finance whatever's going to happen with this before we start throwing money at it, not knowing whether we're even going to be able to do what the suggestions recommend that we do.
That's a policy question.
Is that,
One of the challenge, so two things for you to
Okay.
think about there. And I think it speaks to viewing this as an investment against the long-term preservation of the building. Ultimately, the community and the council, as the representatives of the community, have to give staff direction on what you want to happen inside this building. But regardless of that decision, there are elements of the outside of the building, the preservation of it for as part of our historical district and improving the accessibility that have to happen regardless of the interior use. So part of this study is to draw those delineations for you to have an informed conversation that no matter what the community wants and decides this building should be used for, there's a minimum level of investment just to get to the point where you can open up those possibilities. Part of the study is to then tell you what the nature of the costs are as you move through those possibilities as well. So I think quite a bit of this cost is unavoidable if you're trying to figure out what you want. And, you know, I will remind the council members who went through the deliberation about this before, you had members of the community offering to pay for you to have as-built, I think not even realizing how far behind we were in being able to say whether we needed them or not. And it's just, this building needs to be better understood if you're going to make an informed decision.
All right, well, all right, next question, maybe for you, Mr. City Manager, is where are we getting $250,000 to pay for this?
So the council has in its general fund reserve, might have to put $1 million on the spot because I don't have the number in front of me. How much is currently allocated for capital? And so that's a one-time zero-sum account, right? Every time you spend $1 out of it, it's just bringing down other opportunities for capital investment. So that's where this would come from. $5 7 million. So there's about 7 million in the general fund reserve that you've designated for capital. And so that's where the money would come from.
And that 7 million at this point is completely unallocated for any other projects. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I think, Amelia, you need to come to the mic because now he's going to quiz you.
I mean, I'm just, the thing is, I think one of our most important roles here is we're, have to be fiscally responsible to our community that, we're not spending money we don't have, or we're not, going to put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. So I just want to make sure before we, authorize that kind of spending that we've got it ready, it's not going to hurt other things. Well, sorry, we can't do the sewers because we already spent the money on getting an opinion on what to do, with the building.
Give me a moment. I might be able to call up the actual list from the past council.
I don't have the specific data on
Yeah.
how the 7 million has been allocated, so we will need to do additional research before we can answer that question.
I just need to be able to find it. It might take
No,
me
no,
a few
no
minutes.
worries.
I have it here. Hang on. So right now, you have parked 4 to 5 million as potentially contributing and guaranteeing the library project, but we plan to bring you as part of the budget cycle opportunities to bring that number down. We've identified other sources to reduce that number. And then you have roughly 2.5 million that hasn't really been assigned. There's some small projects in there that you've already allowed assignment to. But you still have still have probably about 2 million, and it just hasn't been assigned to any particular project yet.
All right. And Julian, I'm sorry, just Sorry for the musical chairs. Okay.
Little name
Yes.
plates.
Julian, is there any outcome which this analysis would be unnecessary? So let's say hypothetically go to the public and they say, you know what? Do X with it, whether it's, lease it out to somebody else, just make it a museum. Is there any scenario that we're not going to have to spend this $250,000 or whatever it comes out to be?
Well, I don't think I'm allowed to speak it, but if we were to demolish this building and build a new structure, then the historic structures report will, and all of the analysis will be for naught, but I don't see that as being a legitimate outcome. So in reality, I don't think so.
And I'm also not sure Mr. Skinner's correct. I probably could ask Ms. Simone to come up and confirm what I'm about to say. I think under CEQA, you can't do that scenario without first having the historical structures report
Yes.
in order to measure the impact on the historic
Right.
district. of
So we need
that
it
scenario.
anyway.
You
So-
would need to do the 55,000 part one, yes, even if
Yeah.
you were going to demolish the building, but you would not need to do all of the follow-up analysis.
Okay. Hmm.
I appreciate where you're coming from with that, and I think that's really important that we are a very fiscally responsible council, and we always have been, and we challenge these things. But I kind of look at it, my background's healthcare. I kind of look at it as this is all those things you do when you go to the doctor and you have a pain, and they do the CAT scan and they do the PET scan and they do whatever they need to do to get the facts, to get the data to make a diagnosis. And we don't have a diagnosis of what the real issues are in this building, even if we decide it's going to become a restaurant hub or whatever it's going to be in the future. We'll need that information to make this a viable building one way or another. So I think we need to go forward with it. And I'm confident that Julian, as an excellent public works director, is very fiscally clear with his bid offerings to make sure that the corporation or the companies that work with us know that that's what our expectation is. And then we'll know why we have a pain here or a pain there, because we all have the diagnosis.
And while I agree with you, taking it from the patient perspective,
You're
if
the
patient-
lawyer's
if
perspective.
patients didn't have health insurance,
Yeah.
there'd be a lot less diagnostic.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't have health insurance. We don't have insurance covering this. Is coming out of our pockets. But having said that, I have no further questions for staff on this. Although, let me ask, I guess a question would be, is it possible to authorize part of this? And I mean, would that make any sense? I mean, I guess that,
I mean, you could, and then we would have to come back with an amendment. But I think the way that we're gonna set this about, we could come back to you with an update. We could authorize this as a not to exceed. They're not gonna be able to spend any money until I authorize them on certain tasks. And then if we strategize the progress on the work such that we come back to you when we've spent the money we know we need to spend. And we've got some public feedback, so we can share that with you. And then we can give you a better forecast of how much the 232 we're actually going to spend. Then we wouldn't have to come back and do a formal amendment. We don't have to do an amendment to underspend, but we would have to come back and do a formal amendment to add money on. So that's either way. But
I'm going to play to the
follow-
mayor if I can for a real quick sec. I know the mayor enjoys hypotheticals. So hypothetically, I'm going to ask Julian, hypothetically, if the council undid its vote, which its vote was to begin the process to evaluate how to preserve this as City Hall. I want to make sure we're clear. That's what you voted to
We
do.
get you.
That's why you're getting this proposal. So hypothetically, if the council undid that vote and said, we want to go back to having the broader conversation first, would you need some semblance of this report in order to inform that conversation of all these different options for the building?
yes, you would. think, because we said you would need a historic structures report if you were going to do anything significant to this building. So.
Okay.
So I think that might be a way to give you some comfort. I think trying to unwind it and have the conversation, you're gonna land here again, no matter what your choices were.
Okay, that's fair. Yep. Okay, no further comments on my end. Anybody else on council have comments? Do we have a motion?
You might want.
The comment. Oh, sorry. Public comment. Anybody who has comments, please come up and share your thoughts.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to say that I'm really excited about this. And I look forward to seeing what Page and Turnbull discover, whether it be through their laser analysis or the methods that they use to examine this building. I think that, in the 111 years of this building being used as a municipal public space, I think it deserves the respect of going through this process. And I really encourage us to stay on that path of keeping it as a municipal building. And despite beautiful new buildings being erected around us, Corte Madera, the new library, they don't have what we have, which is the soul of this building and the history that has been made in these rooms. But that's a topic for another day. I just wanted to quickly add that as we go through this process, the Heritage Board should be included as much as possible with respect to the municipal code and our role. It would be exciting to see a copy of the draft report and any information that the city is given, just so we can sort of start engaging with that process as well. Because I do think the Heritage Board has a lot to offer. And we are members of the community and we reach out to our fellow Larkspurians. And, we're very enthusiastic about this. I am personally. So I guess that's all I wanted to just say, those 2 points. Like, I'm excited and I look forward to working with the city in your office.
Thank you. Are there other public comments on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Are there other comments from council members on this item? Can I get a motion from anyone on this item?
So I'll move resolution 2424, amending the fiscal year 23-24 capital improvement program budget for the City Hall renovation study. And resolution 2524 authorizing a consulting service agreement with Page and Turnbull for the City Hall renovation study. Is that sufficient? Okay.
I'll second that.
Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes.
Vote your kind.
Okay, motion passes. 8.2. Fiscal year 2024-2025 budget trends and challenges. Can we get a staff presentation on this, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Administrative Services Director Amelia Gabrielle's going to join me. And actually, she gets to have that. So as a reminder for the council and the public, over the years, our budget process has evolved into a 4-step process. So step 1 was you got to hear from the departments about what their accomplishments and ambitions and goals are. So that was at the last meeting. At this meeting, I know a lot of folks feel the line item budget is where the real work gets done, but I actually think the information you're getting tonight, which you'll then get in written form as part of the line item budget, is the most crucial, because tonight you're going to hear from Ms. Gabrielle and me about the assumptions we're building into the budget, which drive when I come to you and say what we can and can't afford in the line item budget. And so this is your opportunity to hear from us what we're wrestling with, both on the revenue side and feeling comfortable that our projections are correct. And then you get to hear about what we see as difficulties on the expenditure side. As is our practice, a lot of this focuses, particularly tonight, on the general fund operating budget. So that's the core part of the city's operations. There's certainly another host of special funds. And as we start to go through the rest of your budget process, we'll probably spend as much time in some of those special funds as we will in the operating budget. This is our bread and butter. And the assumptions you can hear about tonight are driving that discussion. And we're going to go slowly through the slides and encourage you to stop us. This is not a public hearing tonight. This is set up as a business item, so it can be as dynamic as you want. And we can talk about all of that. So the other thing I'll say before I let Amelia get started is it is amazing what can happen in a year. I think last year I was almost giddy during this presentation because we were finishing a pretty strong run of revenues exceeding projections. I hope that continues. And we were doing a pretty long run of very predictable expenditures. But I think you're going to hear tonight, we're starting to see some trends that give us a little bit of pause. So that'll be a theme this evening. Amelia, turn over to you.
Right. Good evening. My name is Amelia Gabrielle. I am the Administrative Services Director with the City of Larkspur. This presentation is to provide the council with a preliminary state of the budget update for the upcoming fiscal year. So I'm going to start with a general overview of the uncertainties in the economy. So we are in an election year. Current interest rates are higher than they were before March 2022. There's uncertainty as to how long the interest rates will remain at the current level. The rate of inflation is lower than it was in 2022 at 8%, but it's still higher than the inflation target of 2% set by the Federal Reserve Bank. So the latest data was at 3.5% nationally. As for the labor market, the unemployment rate is pretty low at 3.8% nationally, 5.3% in California, and at below 4% in Marin County. The last thing I want to touch on the uncertainty is the governor's budget. So the May revise will be coming out on May 10th. When the governor presented his January budget for 24-25 back in January, he was projecting a deficit of $38 billion for the year. And the Legislative Analyst Office estimated that the budget deficit would be $68 billion. So I think the economy is facing some headwinds. So these are the signals that we're seeing at a broader level. Now turning to the local level, before I move to the next slide, Dan, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I just add a couple of comments to give a little bit of context. So the state budget's volatility tends to revolve around transaction and use sales. That's their unpredictability. So when they say they're having a deficit, they're seeing a lot more volatility in that revenue stream. We've enjoyed a period of relative insulation from the level of volatility that the state's projecting in its budget. But as we go through this presentation, you hear about some changes in the way monies are moving around the state in the sales tax world that are affecting us. And then on the labor market, you're going to hear some themes this evening. One of the challenges that we're facing is that some of our specific labor markets are in a period where there's heavy competition for labor. And so heavy competition means you need to incentivize people to take your positions. And so we're dealing with that right now.
Okay, so at the local level, we'll be discussing trends as it concerns our property tax, sales tax, transient occupancy tax, and we'll also go over major cost components of our budget. So with that, I'm starting with the revenue trend for sales tax. So the graph in front of you shows the annual sales tax for a period of 10 years. So we look at HDL data from our sales tax consultant and our current tax receipts trend when we're projecting sales tax for the upcoming year. The sales tax in fiscal year 24-25 will be about 12% of our total general fund revenue. This is about $3 million. Currently, in our current fiscal year, sales tax is trending lower than originally budgeted. We saw a 12% decrease during the first 6 months of this fiscal year compared to the previous year. We're anticipating a small sales tax rebound in fiscal year 24-25, but it's unlikely to reach the previous level we experienced in fiscal year 22-23 at 3.2 million.
Yeah, and so two things to give, look, sorry. Yeah, I was in it. So I'll give you two reasons that I think are driving that. One is we need to not lose sight that one of our major sales tax providers went out of business. That was the Bed Bath and Beyond. So that's having a very obvious effect. And until that area redevelops into whatever it's going to redevelop, we don't know how its long-term effect is on our revenue stream, but that's a short term. I do want to remind the council, though, that baked into your policies on your reserves are to hold money back for this very contingency, which is temporary loss of sales tax due to the closure of a significant business. It's actually itemized in your policy as one of the reasons to keep that healthy reserve. So the other thing is there are two kind of blips you're seeing over the last 5 fiscal years. That has to do with the way internet sales tax is sent to local municipalities in the state. That first sort of spike that we experienced, the 3.43 million you're seeing up there, that was the infamous Wayfair decision, which was a national court case that established that the large retailers online needed to collect sales tax and send it to the states to be distributed however the states distribute it. Since then, there's been a lot of wrangling in the state of California about the systems that are used to distribute those internet sale monies. It's essentially, first they try to look at the way it ought to be distributed to each municipality that collects sales tax. And essentially each county gets sales tax that was considered to have been generated within that county. And then the county has a proportionality system that they've been assigned by the state that looks at sort of your general share of sales tax countywide. So that's a fairly consistent number, and Larkspur kind of gets its share. But what's now happening is that there's quite a bit of dispute in the state about what constitutes a point of sale. And in California, we are still essentially on our core sales tax, our Bradley Burns sales tax. It's driven by a point of sale. Where are we recording that sale happened? It's very different than your special sales taxes, the Measure B and the Measure G fund. Those are transaction and use taxes that are called destination taxes. They have to do with where the goods were delivered. So these fulfillment centers that you're seeing pop up around the state are often getting themselves assigned as the point of sale within the companies that set them up. And you have communities in different parts of the state who have the available land to incentivize the development of fulfillment centers. So what's happening to a place like Larkspur that's not playing in that sandbox is that we're seeing this diminishment in the distribution of some of this internet sales tax because we're losing it to these now fulfillment centers that are being identified as point of sale. And so does that explain everything there? No, but it's part of the trend. And this is a big debate at statewide I'm actually sitting, I think some of the council members know, on behalf of the city managers group in Marin, sitting on the statewide city managers task force to debate this issue. There's also a council level task force at the California League of Cities debating how this issue should go, but it's winners and losers, right? If you're already winning, you're already getting this money, you're not going to want to let it go. And you've got a community like ours saying, well, this doesn't make any sense to us. We ought to be seeing some of this money because our people are the ones buying things. So stay tuned. But that's contributing some of this softening. And HDL, our consultants, are saying we should probably expect generally flat sales tax revenue for the next 2 or 3 cycles. So now, any questions you have about that? I'm sorry, I just want to get that.
Warehouses in Tracy are taking all of our money out there and off the I-5.
You know, you might be surprised where some of these fulfillment centers are located. I think there's quite a few tucked away in pockets in Sonoma County. I think there's a surprising number tucked away in pockets of Napa County. And so they might be closer than you think they are. I will actually compliment some of the communities. I know where some of these centers are, and they're getting smarter about making them less intrusive on the community and sort of putting them in locations that people don't view them as eyesores. Anyway.
Can I ask a couple of questions about sales tax?
Sure.
So when someone pays or when someone shops locally and they pay the, whatever, 9.5% sales tax, how much of that actually comes to the city of Larkspur?
So the Bradley Burns base sales tax is 7.25 or 7.25. Yeah. So there's a base sales tax that every community has. And we get essentially 1% or 1 cent on a dollar from that
1%.
sale. And that's true of every community in the state, every local municipality. So whether it's a county or a city. And then communities have elected to adopt or take to the voters for adoption transaction and use taxes. So that's that delta you're talking about in our community, where we've added, in our case for Larkspur, we have 2 of those taxes, and in combination, they add another % onto the bill.
Got it.
I was just going to add
Okay.
that special tax is different. As I mentioned, it's called a destination tax. So if you drive up to Best Buy in San Rafael and you decide to buy a television and you decide to take it home in your car, then any special taxes are going to be San Rafael special taxes.
Right.
But if you pay them and say, deliver it to my house, it's actually going to get charged the Larkspur special taxes, and they're going to come here. So please have your stuff delivered.
I have that.
So hang on, so then what, so if I order something from Amazon,
You will be
What-
charged the special taxes, and they will
Of
come to
Larkspur.
us.
so
Yes.
what is the warehouse?
The
Where's
Bradley
that place?
Burns,
Thank
that
you.
1% is being retained at the fulfillment center location.
Got it. So if we get it delivered from Best Buy, that 1% goes to San Rafael.
Right, because that's the point of sale. That was where the cash register was. And essentially what businesses have been setting up is that the fulfillment centers are the cash register location. So that's why that 1% is staying there.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's that flow that you're starting to see, and it's happening all over the state, and it's creating these. And again, some communities are big winners here. That's why also the special taxes apply to automobiles. To when somebody purchases an automobile now, we actually get that 1% total between our two. And Advisory Way actually brought me something interesting at one point. I'd never seen this before. She had shopped in the town of Sonoma, and the business she shopped at had itemized out of the cash register all the sales taxes and where they were going, which was really interesting to see, because I think you had ordered some things to be delivered and it showed our tax on the bill.
Yeah, I bought something in a store. They didn't have my size, so they had to deliver the second item. And then the tax receipt was so broken down very specifically, and it listed Larkspur tax that I was going to pay. And I brought it to, and I'd never seen something like that. And it was because that second item was purchased there, but delivered to me. And it
So that's
was,
good news. It's working the way it's supposed to work. I am an advocate in those statewide meetings that clearly the computer technology now exists to do destination taxes. So why isn't the Bradley Burns being distributed on a destination basis? That would be certainly what, as your representative, I advocate for. But I also understand that if you're a community that's essentially invested in taking on the externalities of a fulfillment center, you want that revenue base. So.
Right. Okay, my second question is, can you tell us what the breakdown is of the sales tax bar between internet sales versus local
I
tax
can't at
rates?
this moment. I could give you
Yeah,
that.
so how,
breakdown.
how much were you being impacted by internet sales versus?
We can get you
okay.
an estimate of that data. It's still a modest amount.
Okay.
We enjoy a pretty healthy, solid, stable brick and mortar
Okay.
Bradley Burns base.
Mhm.
I know not everybody likes me to say this, but because we have HDL talk to us about things that we are a winner in, or we bring in revenue from other communities because of what we offer in our brick and mortar base and what we're losing to other communities. And we look at that because it might inform our ability to incentivize or encourage different diversification of our business base. I think we're one of the biggest winners in the county for alcohol sales, and it has to do with the number of it has to do with the number of restaurants, and it has to do with the number of stores that are attractive to the Marin community for the types of alcohol that they're selling. You know, if you look around, we just happen to have a fair number of those. So it's our number one they call it capturing. So it's our number one capture is actually that base.
Interesting. Okay, great. Thanks.
Quick question. So, kind of stepping back, so the sales tax, we're looking at assumptions. So we have essentially, we're assuming $3 million. And that's hypothetical,
Shy of $3 million,
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
little bit. For
and-
fiscal year 24-25.
Correct.
Yes.
And the economic environment that you brought up in the first slide, higher interest rates, inflation pressure, state budget. So, the Fed decision, I think, was today, and the inflation pressure, I think, we're definitely lower than we were in 2021 or 22, I think. And then the state budget, I'm not sure what, a May 10th decision will do, but can you just tell me a little bit more about how those three, helped you arrive at that number? Because are we assuming that the Fed's not going to drop the rate 0.25, or are we assuming it will at the end of the year? What are some of the assumptions specific to that number that you made?
Well, the assumptions are based on the tax we've collected this year and the lower trend that I described earlier. The first 6 months, was lower by 12%. And then we work with our consultant HDL to determine what the tax level will be, the sales tax level will be for next fiscal year. We look at outside expertise from HDL specifically, in these areas that you just talked about.
So yeah.
It may be helpful too to just help. So we're your empowered agents to have access to the sales down to the business level. That's a proprietary information. So only a select number of people are given that ability to analyze that data. So we do that with HDL, and we have pretty candid conversations about what we're seeing as trends within specific industries within our base. And so they then have an economic team that's taking the information you're asking about, and they apply it to the specific trends that they're seeing relative to our base, because we're getting into that granular level of what we're seeing in the performance of those particular industries. And so it does get to that level, but we do rely on them to help us synthesize all of that information to come up with the projection. What we typically do is take their projection and make it a little more conservative, actually, just to be on the safe side. And so Amelia has been tracking real data and then using that to say, I think HDL is actually being maybe a little bullish on where the economy is going, and we should be a little softer about where it's going. just to make sure that we bring you a budget that we feel more comfortable the revenue projections are where they should be.
Okay, so maybe a little bit more of a in the weeds question, I know in finance it's different, but I'm used to seeing error bars. So what would you say from, they gave you something that was, not, you conservative to not conservative. What's the range here? Because, this goes to Mayor Candel's point that one of our jobs is to make sure we don't, get into things where we don't have money for it. And these are really, to me, some of the key, parts of this discussion is like, how confident can we be that we're going to realize close to 3 million? Like, is the error bar down to 2.5 or is it 2.9 or?
That's a challenging question. I guess I was trying to put an error magnitude and looking, because this has been our approach for several years. I'd say we try to land in a sweet spot that's within, so that we have kind of a 2.5% range of error on both sides, just in case. But again, we usually try to start creeping down because I'd rather come to you and be wrong on the conservative side of things and on the optimistic side of things. So, you may recall in past budget discussions, when we do get into line item discussions and I tell you we might be looking at a deficit, we often tell you, but we feel reasonably confident that we'll cure the deficit over the year. And a lot of times that's because we've built a cushion in by sort of knocking down our revenue stream estimates a little bit.
Okay, so I can sleep better at night. 2.5% means we could be off by $75,000, which is in our reserves. And so we're not.
Exactly. We would never bring you anything that we thought would even
Okay,
cause a major dip into the reserve. The only thing that is ever going to throw us that far off would be the unanticipated loss of a major generator. So, but even with Bed Bath & Beyond, we started to know that was going to happen. We had major signals that was happening. So we started to plan for its eventuality.
okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, we have the general fund transient occupancy tax trend. So this is a 10-year trend. The revenue is generated by the Marriott Courtyard. I will call it the TOT. So the TOT will be about 4% of the total general fund revenue in fiscal year 24-25, or $850,000. We have seen a softening of the TOT starting in November of 2023, and we anticipate that the TOT will continue to soften and then hold steady at the lower level in fiscal year 24-25, which is projected at $850,000.
Yeah, and as a reminder, by policy, you have 90% of the TOT going into the general fund operating budget and 10% going into a special fund that we've labeled the TOT fund. So the bars you're seeing there are at 90% of the total revenue stream. So that, I know it's hard to read. It's actually a lot easier on the television. We'll work on that for the next meeting. So we're projecting the general fund will receive $850,000 in TOT, but the total revenue to the city is on the magnitude of $940,000 because you're setting aside that portion that's going to go into the special fund. So, and we haven't had a chance yet to have a dialogue as we've indicated. This is one of the few revenue streams we don't have to be that secretive about who's generating it, because I think 99% of the TOT comes from one place, and that's our one hotel. And so, when we start to see changes in their performance, we usually reach out, get a little sense of what's going on. In the past, this type of softening usually means they've lost a corporate contract or something like that. Because the Marriott here in Larkspur has a part of its base as corporate contracts, so that entities like Chevron, for example, in the past was a corporate contract where folks who needed to come visit the corporate HUD in Richmond could actually opt to stay in Larkspur if they wanted to, and there was that sort of thing. So I'm going to guess with that might be some of what we're seeing. It could also just be the economic trend of people aren't traveling as much, and when they're traveling, Marin may not be the choice that they're making. For those who've been with us for a long time, we saw this wonderful upward trajectory over the last decade, and that was because the Marriott at one point got itself changed from a Marin property to a San Francisco property within the Marriott database. So when you say you want to visit San Francisco, it comes up as one of your options. And then if you go, and I don't know if you ever looked, you get this whole thing. Wouldn't it be wonderful to stay in Marin and take the ferry and to see your sights in San Francisco?
It
And
is.
so-
It's a good idea.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a big reason for the
Get your
jump that
crop
occurred
break into it, San Francisco.
pre-pandemic with Marriott.
So wasn't there a movement to get Airbnbs and VRBOs and other things having a TOT?
So we're the council to explore and decide you wanted to legalize operation of Airbnb for less than 30 days. Because
Right.
right now
It's
legally,
at 30 days.
it has to be a long-term rental, not a short-term rental. Then one of the options you could explore would be
Okay.
whether or not you would want us to retain help to administer a TOT collection. A lot of cities have made that decision. I see that Miss Simone is still here, so I'll speak on her behalf. That she'll want to talk to you about the pros and
cost,
cons
yeah.
versus the base of housing in the community. Because communities that are authorizing short-term rental are now seeing that one of the challenges are that units are coming off the market and being exclusively used for that purpose.
And we've typically used the TOT for our Chamber of Commerce budget line item in part of it.
Not this amount. 'Cause
Not-
this
right.
is what you're putting into operations.
Right.
But that 10% that's
The
going into
10%.
the special fund, that's where the chamber's been one of the expenditures.
So we are seeing a trend down in that. Yeah.
You're seeing a slight trend downward, but again, our total projection for TOT is about 940,000. So you have 90, I think we actually have a 94,000 projected to go into the TOT fund next year.
Okay. Keep going.
So next slide, we can see here the property tax for a period of 10 years. I'd like to start by saying we look at Marin County Assessor data points and current tax receipts trend when we're projecting our property tax. The property tax will be about 67% of the total general fund revenue in fiscal year 24-25. That represents $15.7 million. We anticipate an increase of 5% in property tax over the current fiscal year. And the property tax is expected to grow at a slower pace than previously. So just to give you some context, in fiscal year 23-24, the city has had an 11% growth rate in property tax. Next year, we're projecting a 5% increase. And what we're hearing from Marin County is that they're projecting a 4.5% growth rate in 25-26 and 4% in fiscal year 26-27. Now, on the bright side, the property tax is less volatile than other sources of revenue, and that consists of about 65 to 70% of our revenue sources. So Dan, would you like to? add
Only
anything?
comment to add here, maybe addressing in line with your previous question, Councilmember Paulson. The assessor's office in Marin has an incredible track record of accuracy in their projections. I mean, if they tell you 5%, at worst, unless they made a mistake that I haven't seen in years, it's going to be 4.8% to 5.2%. I mean, and it's almost always what they tell us it's going to be. And that's understandable if you think about the way property tax works, right? We have the base amounts and then 2% gets tacked on every year. So they should be relatively accurate. But what I applaud the assessor for is they sort of have trend data so they can sort of predict out turnover in your base and incorporate that into their projection.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to the general fund expenditure. So I want to talk about the Central Marin Fire Authority budget, budgeted expenditures for the past 5 years. And that includes also what we're projecting next fiscal year. Fire services represent about 27% of the total budgeted expenditures for the city of Larkspur. The annual budgeted expenditures increased from 9.4 million to 12.1 million over the past 5 years. On average, this is a 7% annual increase, looking only at the past 3 years. And as a reminder, member agencies are Corte Madera and the city of Larkspur, and we're cost sharing the expenditures at 50%, at a 50% rate.
Yeah, so we decided to include this slide this year in this part of the presentation because one of the things I alluded to is that labor market is affecting us. And in the two areas it's most affecting us are the two public safety JPAs. The real positive news is we don't bear 100% of those shifts because we're sharing with other member agencies. And that's one of the beauties of our Joint Powers Authority arrangement. But two things are driving some of the uptick in the Central Wind Fire Authority. And when we get to the line item budget meeting, we're going to have brief presentations from the two public safety agencies because they will by then have adopted their budgets. These are what we believe their budget will be, but the Fire Council and the Police Council are meeting this month. Bear in mind that when we created this Joint Powers Authority, we knew we were going to see this curve because both Corte Madera and Larkspur were running what I would call skeleton operations for fire. We were doing almost no prevention. We were doing almost entirely response. And one of the things we heard loud and clear from the community through the council and eventually the Fire Council was we want better fire service. And so we've invested heavily in building up the prevention aspect of our operations. And so that first part of the curve was driven heavily by that. Now we're sort of seeing it continue because we're dealing with some of these labor issues. Fire has not reached a point where we're in trouble in terms of labor issues. We still get out, we still have applicants. It's just, we're seeing a trend that suggests more competition to get the best people.
Our next slide is about the expenditure trend for the Central Police. Oh. That should be Central Police
It is.
Fire Authority. That doesn't- there's-
The header's wrong on the large text, it's correct in the small text. So
Those should
we
be
missed that
Central
one.
Marin Police. Okay, so you can see the budgeted expenditure for a period of 5 years. Police services represent about 21% of the total budgeted expenditure for the city of Larkspur. The annual budgeted expenditure increased from 13 million to 16.4 million over a period of 5 years. So due to the labor contract renewal, the cost increase is projected to be at a little bit over 10% compared to this year. This is for fiscal year 24-25. Again, the cost is shared amongst San Anselmo, Corte Madera, and Larkspur. And I think Dan will want to talk about the CMP Management Committee that is proposing to use one-time fund balance and one-time cost reduction of about $1 million to balance the budget for fiscal year 24-25.
Yeah, so I want to take a step back and remind everybody historically what was happening because we were enjoying very smooth, modest growth in the curve for this agency's budget. And then the pandemic came, civil unrest came. And in addition, we're going through a period when there's a shrinking labor force. So we came out of the early part of the pandemic and people just didn't want to be police officers anymore. And you've seen media coverage probably about agencies offering $75,000 to sign up with their agency to be a police officer. That's separate from their pay. That's just sign up and you're going to get paid that amount. So that competition started in roughly fiscal year 22-23. We were fortunate in where our labor contract was, to not feel the brunt of that growing competition for talent. Now we are. And so we're projecting for the whole agency budget a pretty significant increase as we reconcile with labor what it's going to cost to employ an officer. A quirk of the way we budget for the JPAs is we budget for full staffing, provided we're fiscally able to do that, whether or not we actually are at full staffing, because we always have to worry that there'll be a flood of new applicants and we'll reach full staffing in the year. So we have to budget that way. I'm telling you that because we haven't been full staffed for several years. So through a number of circumstances, the fund balance was building up in this agency. So we had excess monies that we were banking and putting in reserves. In order to soften the blow of this spike that we know is coming in this upcoming fiscal year, the management committee is recommending the police council to use some of these one-time monies to spread the impact over multiple years, essentially, to smooth the effect of these new labor costs. So we know we're going to take a bit of a hit in the fiscal year we're discussing. We know we're going to take a bit of a hit in the next fiscal year after that. But because we're going to recommend some of these one-time monies be pumped back into the operation for 1 year, it at least allows the member agencies time to prepare their budgets to cope with the total impact over the next 3 years.
That'll be presented next week at the
At the
fire
police-
council.
police
and
council,
Police council
yeah.
meeting.
Yep.
And, okay,
So that'll be one of the issues that you'll need to be debating at the police council.
yeah,
For the two representatives is sort of your comfort level with that. But every dollar of that smoothing effect that we're proposing that you don't put in is a dollar. It's got to come from the member agency's general fund budgets. So-
right.
so it's not the best practice, but the JPA is an unusual animal because at the end of the day, the JPA is entirely based on the member agencies funding it. And so it's not, when we think about the JPA budget, we sometimes apply different procedures than we would ever apply within Larkspur's structural budget, because at the end of the day, Larkspur, Corte Madera, and San Anselmo have to guarantee you that the operation will run and it'll get funded no matter what. So sometimes we've done this practice in the past. If we've allowed the fund balance to build up, we've used it to smooth the impact.
I know this is a conversation for the police and fire council meeting next week, but are you feeling confident that the other agencies are stable enough at this point?
So can you hold that question?
I will till
'Cause
next week.
No, you can hold it till
Oh.
later in this presentation because I actually want to talk about that a little bit. But I
Okay.
want to get through this whole thing so that we have the whole picture.
And can you tell us how much is in the fund, the reserve fund for the police?
After using the fund balance, we'll have 8%. And the target for the fund balance reserve is 5% for that agency.
Yeah, I think what it had swelled to, was it 14,
Yeah,
15%?
a little bit over
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So.
Can we see those numbers next week or whenever the budget gets?
So the
no,
police-
actually,
the
this is
police
at the
count-
fire.
But
That's
the
at
police
never
council
mind.
budget will
Okay,
be
sorry.
published and we'll make sure you
Right,
get a
okay.
copy and that'll
That's
all be
fine.
in there. Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a very basic question. I'm so a couple things seem to be implied here. The 10% increase is largely driven by staff, and I'm assuming by sworn officers on the staff. This isn't, any kind of support functions or.
A fully staffed operation in CMPA is 42 sworn.
42 sworn
And
officers.
I think there's 6 non-sworn employees.
There's a total of 50 staff.
And
So
how
it-
many, I know we're not at full capacity right now. Where are we with that? Out of 42?
6 vacancies?
6 vacancies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you, I don't know if this is appropriate for this conversation, but can you tell me, have there been any problems with having 6 vacancies?
Well, in the police council, I think this actually will get into problems is an interesting word,
Challenging.
right? Our first priority is that every day, everyone is safe in the 3 jurisdictions, right? So we always make sure that core purpose is guaranteed. Then we have to make choices. And by we, I mean the chief making requests for the managers in terms of costs and what's appropriate about some of the regional things we do, some of the extra services that we try to provide. Those are the things that get harder to do when you're down bodies. But we always make sure every day and every night we have that core level of service.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the increase of 10% is because of labor negotiation. There's also other components. We have the other public employee benefits as well as CalPERS unfunded liability. So these are factors that we're also experiencing here at the city of Larkspur.
That's a good segue to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay, so the expenditure trend, that's the last slide about that. So the key message here is that we're seeing cost increases for public safety that are outpacing our revenue growth. Public safety consists of about 47% of total expenditures for the city of Larkspur. And 7 to 10% of the costing, we're seeing 7 to 10% of cost increases, and that's outpacing a revenue growth of 5%. For the next fiscal year. Another aspect here to touch on is the pension. So CalPERS is requiring that we fund the pension unfunded accrued liability in the amount of $466,000 in fiscal year 24-25. This is for the city of Larkspur. We don't have that amount to that we have to spend this fiscal year because there's no requirement for the UAL in fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25. It will be $466,000. This UAL will remain at that level, maybe even higher for the foreseeable future. This is an obligation that the city has for the next 25 years. That's an amortization of 25 years. The amount is total $11 million, which breaks down to $466,000 a year. The next item is the health insurance. So health insurance, Kaiser premium went up by 11% for this calendar year, and we're projecting that it's going to go up by the same percentage next fiscal year as well, next calendar year as well. And other cost increases that we're seeing that are more in alignment with our revenue growth are the COLA for our city employees of 3%. And we have joint power agreements besides the CMPA and CMFA. And typically their increase is about 3 to 5% a year.
So one of the reasons I asked Amelia to put the public safety JPA bars there. One thing I did want to say when we got to this slide is we knew that was coming. We didn't know the magnitude, and frankly, until the tables closed for negotiations, there may be a little bit of variance there, but we knew it was coming, and we've been sort of planning out and being prepared to deal with that. The second bullet's what has thrown off our multi-year projections, because the announcement from PERS that their shortfall was significant enough that all the agencies that participate in PERS were going to be assigned new unfunded accrued liability numbers. That was not anticipated. And I've ranted a few times in front of you that it's kind of amazing to me that while the markets have been doing pretty darn well for the last few years, they somehow haven't been able to do that, keep up. So for perspective, Larkspur, like many local agencies around the state, participated in issuing pension obligation bonds a few years back to zero out our unfunded accrued liability at PERS and essentially move that debt over to the bonds. And what we were working as our model was that if PERS was able to meet its new, more conservative projections for the amount of money it needed, then each year we would get hit with some bill that we would pay that year for the liability. And the magnitude we were projecting and that PERS was projecting was far more modest than what they announced this past year. I think there's two things going on that are driving this. PERS collects money in two ways. They collect against payrolls directly. So they run a calc. They have every member agency run percentages against their payroll, and you send that out. So every time we issue a paycheck to somebody, we send a payment to CalPERS. And then they have their actuary project out how much is needed in their coffers to cover the commitments that have been made in the pension system. And for many years, the amount coming in off the payrolls was sufficient to keep PERS running, right? But payrolls have been the volume and the cost of payrolls have been rising, but the number of employees in the state has been shrinking. And so that's caused them a conundrum because the payroll's not generating what they thought it would generate. Now they're also not seeing the returns that they thought they were going to get off of their portfolio. So they've had this two-pronged loss of, or not loss of revenue, realization of less revenue than they anticipated. So under their system, they just tell all the member agencies, well, we ran new calculations and you need to pay us this amount every year. And so that's what we've been wrestling with.
But are we paying proportionate to how many employees are benefiting from this?
So
Or
this is their calculation of how much we need to start paying them to fund in perpetuity the commitments in the system that are Larkspur commitments.
so I thought when we did the bond funding, we paid down our obligation
We did.
and we're paying back to the bond holder at a much less interest rate, which was the whole idea behind that, which was a great benefit for us. How does CalPERS suddenly get to change the rules of the game in that now? I don't, they seem to be changing the rules, expecting agency members to pay into a brand new system that we didn't negotiate with them. Or am I?
Well, these are agreements that, date back when Larkspur signed up with the
Yeah.
pension program. So you didn't agree,
Right.
but your predecessors 20 generations back or 20 terms back or whenever we joined PERS, I'd have to go look it up, did agree
Yeah.
to this system. And so that's what we're kind of stuck with.
And do we have an opportunity to argue that that dollar amount that they gave us is a true estimate? The 465,000 is a true estimate of what Larkspur itself owes, considering we paid off all of our other debt obligation to them?
And I don't believe you really have a way to argue that their actuary is wrong.
Oh,
Now, the actuary could come back, they could have an amazing year in the market and then they'll recalc this number because it's kind of a
yeah,
dynamic
but they'll never
number, but
they'll never
catch up.
lower it.
They're not gonna, and they're never gonna catch up.
Yeah.
It's just this, I think you're gonna start hearing a lot of local agencies going, wait a minute. To your point, we had this lengthy process and conversation and now you're as volatile as you were 5 years ago.
Right.
Now, if anybody's going, well, why the hell did you do pension obligation bonds? This amount would be like 1.5 million, 1.6 million if you hadn't done that. So you still made the right fiscal decision. This is a bigger picture question about the long-term challenge of dealing with
But
the,
that was a
program.
pretty novel thing to do that bond find. I don't know how many cities and agencies in California did that.
it's
mean,
pretty
we-
significant. I don't have a number, but it was, I mean, the interest rates were so low.
They were, and we
The discount
refinanced.
rates that PERS is using were so high. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And-
we can go back in the report. We have our projection of what we saved. by
When
doing
we
that.
refinance, I mean, I remember March 2020, we shot into a refinance as soon as we could to even lower our expectation at that time.
Right.
But I'm wondering how many, well, it's not going to affect us, but how many cities statewide didn't do anything like that, and now they're hit with an additional amount.
That's a good question.
And
I
our,
don't have an answer to that.
back to my original question about are there member agencies that for our JPA?
Well, good timing.
Hi. So I know we did it. I don't know.
So actually, all the member agencies did, and we actually did it for CMPA.
I remember
There was
that
no reason to do it for CMFA.
because we're brand new.
We kept the liabilities in Larkspur, and Corte Madera kept the liabilities in Corte Madera that had been accrued
Right,
prior to the formation.
right.
So CMFA started brand new with a zero balance. They now have a number because they're starting to be subject to this problem
Yeah.
too. So we're in a period where every agency in the state's going to feel these different economic forces differently based on their individual mixes of revenue and expenditures. And so to your question, how are the other member agencies? In talking with the other managers, I think that we may actually be a year ahead in feeling this pain versus when they're going to start to see it come into their budgets. But both the member agencies for CMPA, for example, have adopted the same best practices that we have, and I feel confident are in the same fiscal stability that we are to manage their way through this difficult period. And I think you're alluding to that was not always the case, and we don't need to single out individual agencies or different councils of management. I think all of us have done the right things to be ready to start weathering this storm. And we all now have to sort of sit and ride through and see its effect. But right now, sales tax is softening, but it's not softening in Marin at a rate where a more sales tax based agency like Corte Madera is necessarily feeling significant pain yet, right? Because, and that's, they're driven as much more by sales tax as a budget than we are. But eventually all agencies are going to reach this point. Right now, in talking to my colleagues, I think because I'm fiscally conservative, I'm probably bringing it to you a little faster than other people are. I've talked to Sausalito. They're probably the farthest along in realizing some serious economic issues because they've never recovered the TOT they lost in the pandemic. So they've been wrestling since the pandemic with a big hole in their revenue streams. And so now on top of it, they have to wrestle with some of these new costs in their organization. So I suspect they'll be having a candid conversation about assumptions in their budget meetings. Everybody will. I want to caution you that we're in a period where each agency, you may hear about agencies that still are feeling really robust because maybe they're still seeing a big swing in property tax. Maybe new properties came online, which is a big driver of a peak in property tax. Maybe their sales tax mix is flourishing. Maybe, it's hard to say to do the comparative until everybody's sort of starting to feel it. And that might take a year or two, but I guarantee everybody's going, whoa, I have this new hit from CalPERS that we weren't prepared for.
I have a question. I may be mistaken, but I was under the impression that there was a period where, city governments, agencies were giving high pensions, incurring future liabilities. At some point, we realized that's a really bad plan to keep doing that moving forward, and we switched. At this point, are we still incurring future liabilities for pension obligations? Or are we just paying off past pension obligations?
You still participate in the system. Employees who came into public service starting in 2013 and on are on a different pension program that bears a different total cost because it's a less enhanced program. And they are sharing what's called the normal costs. So without spending a lot of time in the weeds, basically the employee and the employer, there's a calculation of what's called the normal costs, and then it's divided in half and each of them pay.
So that's what you're talking about, taking out of their payroll.
So every employee who came into public service from 2013 on is on that system.
And is that statewide or is that?
That's a statewide
Okay.
change. That's actually driving some of these labor discussions that we're having though, because and I'm not suggesting it wasn't the right thing to reform the system, but in the old system, if you joined your agency, the pension programs had some longevity incentives built into them. And so you'd see employees that would begin to build up a tenure with an agency, and the pension program was incentivizing them to finish out their career. And that was particularly true of public safety employees. If you're hired after 2013 and you're in this system where every agency is exactly the same, you no longer have that longevity incentive built into it. So your willingness to look at your neighbor and maybe move, or, you know, maybe you live an hour away from your current employer and the agency up the street suddenly hiring, that longevity incentive's gone from the pension program. So one of the things that's driving labor challenges in public safety is that for the first time, you have folks who are saying, I don't really have a particularly strong reason other than I like it here to stay here. There's not that financial incentive unless it's built into my base compensation. So it's shifting mindsets about how we compensate public safety employees.
Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to tell you, we try hard to work with our joint powers authority partners, and that's more than the public safety JPAs. Remember, in your budget book, when you start to go through it, we're going to be talking about a dozen different joint powers authorities that we contribute money to. They're all feeling a lot of these effects, so their bill to us to participate is going up. And until more member agencies reach a point of concern, it gets hard on those boards to start to tamp down those costs. But I think that drum will start to be beat more and more. But we are having to build into this fiscal year budget some assumptions that almost all our JPA organizations are seeing increased budgets because they're also seeing the same inflationary factors that we're all experiencing. And so that's another cost, but I would still continue to advocate. There's a reason we're in these JPAs because overall we could never deliver that level of service on our own for anything close to the cost that the JPAs could deliver them. But as we go through the line item budget, that'll be something we'll highlight for you. So that's our somber walk through, although I think I feel need to close on a high point, or at least a point of compliment to the council's longstanding conservative fiscal stewardship for the taxpayers of Larkspur. We are exceptionally well positioned to use monies that we put in the bank to weather volatility for a year or two in the economy so we can see where these trend lines are before we make significant decisions with long-term ramifications. And that's as we go through this budget process, and I anticipate bringing a deficit because of the PERS number. Bear in mind that we built up those reserves for this very reason, so that in the first moment where you're being hit with these decisions, you don't have to make operational choices that diminish services that you may never recover, right? It gives you that year to really study what's going on. The other caution for all of us, and one reason I think I don't want anybody to overreact, election year is the hardest year. Presidential election year is the hardest year to forecast because the economy stops behaving for 6 months, basically, in any way that's predictable, because you start to see everybody waiting to see who's going to be the president. And we have an election that is anticipated to be contested, and the people participating in the election have very different ideas about how the economy should be managed. And if you recall the last two elections, that was true then. And so some of these revenue streams, we might be coming at the mid-year and saying, oh, we're starting to see signals from the economy about where we're actually going. And we may be coming with adjustments then as we start to understand that better. And then Lastly, I just really have to thank Amelia. This is a lot of work. And when you get the line item budget, we'll publish that next week and then we'll deal with it the week after council meeting in its preliminary draft form. And then we'll work on it again in its final form in June. The amount of work that she and her staff do to get it to that point, it's amazing given our small staff. And so thank you for all your hard work.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Amelia, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, moving on to 8.3. Encroachment permit for Larkspur Community Foundation to install decorative wrap on utility box adjacent to downtown city parking lot at 512 Magnolia Avenue. I have looked through this. Before we have a presentation on this, I just want to take a preliminary poll. I think it's a great idea. I think it's fairly simple. Not sure we need a presentation on it if everybody has read the presentation and and feels that they feel comfortable to vote on this. So does anybody have any questions for Julian on this? All right, can I get a motion on this?
We should probably at least say what the item is, Mr. Mayor.
All right. All right, so there is a utility box by the just down the street here. Actually, do you want to describe this?
We have an offer from the Larkspur Community Foundation to wrap a utility box. It's in a fairly prominent location in the downtown in some art.
Okay.
What's challenging, we would not normally have brought you this type of decision, but there's no real policy in place to govern this. So we brought it to you not only to ask you to make a decision, but we are suggesting that it might be time to have public art policies because there may be growing interest in the community to support, particularly now that we have a partner in the Larkspur Community Foundation. There may be growing interest in the community to support these types of projects. But we want to get to a place where we have a policy and we have a program and we have a way of asking ourselves, is this something we want? So
Okay, but the item today is not to discuss a policy or come up with a policy.
it's to give us direction to work on one, but also to approve this particular piece of art.
Okay, can I first see, is there any questions about this particular piece of art or approving this particular piece of art in this situation? Okay, can I get a motion on approving this piece of art in this particular situation if there are no questions?
Well, there's two things in it.
It's, yeah, okay.
You're moving so fast, there's two things in it. What is the permit fee? He's asking to be.
The item does also, and this is something the council needs to do, you have the option to waive the permit fee. You have a charitable organization funding this project, you might want to do that. That's up to the council. You may want to add that to your motion.
What is the permit fee? I'll make a motion to waive the permit fee. Do I get a second?
So give me a second.
Go ahead.
So-
Vice Mayor, what are your thoughts?
I am the liaison to the Larkspur Community Foundation, and I want to say that I think that this is a wonderful idea that they have, and I really want to appreciate that the Larkspur Community Foundation is very interested in beautification. And they've worked hard on this and to think about it. And I appreciate that they want to, many of our similar towns have this type of art wrap around some of their public structures. So I think this is, to me, a no-brainer. I think it'll be beautiful to have flowers down there, and I would like to waive their permit fee. But part two, I think we need a public art ordinance. It's something I've wanted to work on for a number of years. Actually, since we had quite a lot of controversy about our Sir Francis Drake statue in 2020, I think having a public art ordinance is an important thing that I would like as our council to guide our staff, that it may not be a priority issue, but I would love to see one in the next, in this year be brought forward to us so that we can encourage more community public art to come forward.
And I agree with that. And I just want to make it clear that The reason I am moving quickly on this is because it is a beautiful project and I think
Yes.
it will benefit our community. And I don't think there's any serious opposition to it. So I didn't think we needed any debate or anything like that. So
But would you support a public art ordinance?
I absolutely would discuss, I would want a public art ordinance. I think that deserves discussion because it's complicated. I don't think at 10 o'clock, it's a good time to start
We
that
don't have one.
conversation.
No.
So I would ask that maybe we agendize at some point in the future when we don't have a budget presentation,
Mhm.
that we put it on the agenda for discussion of creating a public art ordinance. And can I put it out to other
Yes.
council members? I don't mean to cut off anybody who has stuff that they would like to say on this topic. Okay, so hearing nothing, can I get a motion to waive the fees for this particular project and to approve this particular project?
I make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I would like to second that.
Okay, can we get a roll call?
Is that clear?
Yes.
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor White.
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes.
I just wanted to put in the record, we already in a public meeting of the Park and Rec Commission tested the idea of part of the policy being the Park and Rec and Art Commission. Because, we have a practice of trying to keep the staffing responsibilities minimal. So we already have a staff structure built into that. We got a positive response. We may initially vet any policy through them with their recommendations and then bring it to you.
That sounds perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 8.4. Is there anything on 8.3 anybody else wants to talk about? If I don't want to cut anybody off, if there's any other conversation. Okay, 8.4 is to appoint Larkspur Citizen of the Year. Can I ask council if there are any nominations that they would like to make? Okay,
Yes, I do.
what do you got
Go
in mind?
ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, because it's 10, she's no longer here, but I want to. I hope she'll watch this afterwards, but I would like to nominate Carol Poseen for Citizen of the Year. Carol lives in Cape Marin, which is the neighborhood of homes along the creek behind Bonaire Shopping Center. She is an active volunteer in our community. She edits, and she started and edits the monthly newsletter Capers and has edited for the last 7.5 years to share information and promote a sense of belonging to our community. She's a member of the Larkspur Chamber of Commerce and also serves on the board of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of Northern California, where she chairs the Marin chapter. In addition, she was a founder of the Cape Marin NRG. And during COVID, she led neighbors to make bag lunches for persons in need through St. Vincent de Paul. Carol is skillful at connecting people and organizing garden tours, art walks, house concerts, and local gatherings to introduce neighbors and government officials. Some of the local issues that she has worked on include saving the community room at Drake's Landing, Niven Park improvements, and helping to resolve her neighborhood's initial resistance to Gott's Restaurant going in and also 1251 South Alicio. I met Carol personally at one of the chamber's candidate forums when I was running for office, and I've since had a chance to get to know her better. Carol is an exceptionally caring person. She exhibits quiet leadership, the kind that is compassionate and wise, courageous and inspiring. She doesn't sit back when she notices injustices or failures in our system. She does something about it. And I think she embodies the spirit of the best of Larkspur and would like to nominate her for Citizen of the Year.
Very well said.
Wow.
Stephanie and I had a conversation about this. We were allowed since there's only two of us.
Mm.
And Carol and her husband were here this evening and she was copiously taking notes. I think it's a very good choice. I realize Carol has self-created a newsletter and seeks out information to inform the community, the greater community on issues that are happening within Larkspur and Green Bay. And I think that sad story in our country is the demise of the local newspaper and the local information that's provided. And she is self-initiated, seeks out stories and topics to add. I just got the capers in the email
Came
yesterday.
yesterday, right?
Yeah, it just came yesterday. As she seeks out information, and this is self-directed. This isn't something that is created by the city. And she attends frequently community meetings so that she can write up a little blurb and a story about them, and looks for information that would be valuable to others. And she does it independently. And I find that to be a very refreshing way of how a democracy should work. So I can concur with that one.
And I will throw in that I do read capers every month. And I find it very valuable. And I would concur as well.
I am also a reader of capers. So, and I full-heartedly endorse Carol. I've gotten to know her as well, and everything that's been said, I agree with. I just had one thought. I also had a conversation with Mayor Candell because there were only two of us. And the thought of, our Kevin Carroll's, and I understand that Citizens of the Year is to be in the parade, and, it's not really something that you do posthumously, but I thought there might just be some way to have an honorary mention. I mean, I fully believe Carol's is a great choice. And I just want to also, given that, Kevin was such an important contributor, and this is the year he passed away, that we can somehow include him in this process.
Okay, so let me ask staff, would it be possible to have a Citizen of the Year and also some type of honorable notice or recognition of somebody where we'd like to recognize their service as well?
Not a lot of rules around this agenda item, so
Make them up.
I guess my answer is yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, and we can reach out to Councilmember Carroll's family. They might want, I don't know where their comfort level is, but there's certainly room in the parade for more than one car. So we can figure that part out too.
Okay, so I guess I will make a motion. Is that what one does for this?
Let's Steph.
Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
wait, are we gonna?
I think essentially Councilmember Andre put a nomination on the floor, so someone has to second her nomination to then vote on it.
I'll
Okay.
second the nomination of Carol Posen for Larkspur Citizen of the Year.
Okay,
Councilmember Andre?
Can I ask one question? Sorry. So did we want to do like a co-citizen of the
Well,
year?
yeah, so I don't know
What do we?
exactly. It was motion
Okay.
second. I don't want to interrupt
Okay.
you guys. I
Okay.
don't know if it's be appropriate to make a friendly amendment
Yeah.
to have a
Should we-
co
Yeah.
citizen and also recognize Councilman Carroll
Good idea.
as Citizen of the Year as well.
Do their co-amendment.
Okay.
That's why we don't need 5 council members. Just get along so damn well.
You did that very well, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so now we have a motion with a
This.
friendly amendment. Can we get a roll call on that, please?
Councilmember Andre?
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Candell?
Yes. Okay, good times. Now, that leads us to adjournment. Before we adjourn, however, sometimes we recognize people at adjournment. Today, I would like to recognize Daryl Foreman, who has passed away Friday night, and adjourn this meeting in his honor. For people that don't know Daryl, he helped create the Larkspur Marina Finance Authority, and he had an expertise in biology and engineering. He was active with the wetlands, the waterways, the Delta. He's just donated a lot of his time and expertise to the city, and I just wanted to recognize him with our adjournment today. And with that, we are adjourned.